Hey guys, tonight we dive into a tale that shimmers just below Sailimu Lake's surface, where legends slumber like ancient kings in stone coffins. You may think you're safe on solid ground, but by the end of this journey you might not survive your first step, or at least your pillow talk will get a little damp. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'm curious. Drop a comment and tell me your city and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the pebbled shore of Sailimu Lake as the sun dips low, painting the water in molten gold and bruised purple shades. A cool breeze carries the faint scent of pine and something almost metallic, like forgotten coins tumbling in slow motion beneath the waves. Around you, fishermen pack their nets for the night, their lanterns bobbing gently, reflections trembling on the surface. Their whispered conversations drift over. Tales of vanished rooftops, spires that pierce the moon's reflection, and ancient bells that toll without human hands. You lean closer to the water's edge, toes curling in smooth stones, and you almost expect to hear muffled voices rising from the depths. Voices that have waited centuries for curious ears like yours. The villagers leave you alone by design. They've learned that outsiders who pry too deeply either leave too terrified to speak of what they've seen or simply never return. You feel their eyes tracing your silhouette as you walk along the shore, some well-wishing you a safe journey, others warning you in hushed tones to stay away. But curiosity is a stubborn companion. You soil your boots on damp sand and drift toward an old wooden bench carved with chipped calligraphy you can't quite read. You sit, heart thumping like a tribal drum, and gaze at the water as though it holds all the world's secrets in its glassy embrace. An old fisherman with a face as weathered as driftwood ambles your way, his lantern swaying like a ghost's heartbeat. He squats beside you, eyes glinting in the lantern light. "You hear the lake speak?" he asks in a voice as raspy as dried leaves. You shrug and admit you hear only the wind and gentle lapping. He smiles, a thin, crooked curve, and nods toward the far horizon. "Listen when the moon is high. You'll hear a bell toll from the deep, calling out to be remembered." He taps the wooden side of his boat, where faint carvings of towers and arches trace a faded map. "There's a city down there," he says, "and it's waiting for someone brave enough to remember its name." You peer into the murky edge, water so clear it seems like a polished mirror until it suddenly gives way to darkness. Below, you imagine rooftops sloping down into inky depths, walls aflame with moss and silt. A shiver skates down your spine, and you rub goosebumps from your forearms with an involuntary laugh. "Probably just fish," you mutter, though neither of you truly believes it. The fisherman grunts and stands, patting your shoulder in a gesture that's hard to read. Comfort or warning, you're not sure which. Lantern in hand, he heads back to his boat, leaving you alone with a rising unease and a head full of half-remembered legends. As twilight deepens, you wander along the water's rim, stones crunching underfoot, listening for that phantom bell. The air feels thicker here, as though each breath draws in whispers from another time. You pause at a cluster of reeds, tilting your head as a faint echo drifts across the lake. It's not quite a bell, more like metal against metal, distant and mournful. Your pulse accelerates. You know your heart thumping is too loud, but you can't seem to quiet it. Against your better judgment, you step closer to the edge, ankle deep in icy water that steals warmth from your bones. You hear it again, a soft, deliberate toll, urging you to remember. In the soft glow of the fisherman's lanterns now fading behind you, you catch sight of something just beneath the surface. A dark, straight line that runs parallel with the shore. It could be a log, a trick of light, or the beginning of something far older and more deliberate. You crouch, fingertips grazing the chilly water, trying to trace its path. Your vision blurs as ripples distort the image, but you swear it looks like a stone wall. Ancient, carved, and infinitely deep. Your chest tightens. You remind yourself, breathe. You pant in shallow gulps, blinking away the sudden dizziness as if willing yourself back to ordinary reality, where there are no submerged cities, only fishermen and family heirlooms and sleepy nights by the hearth. But reality feels thin. You stand and shake out your arms, stamping one foot to chase away the numbness. The reeds rustle behind you, though there's no wind. You turn, squinting into the darkening tree-line that rims the lake. Shapes twist in the gloom, trees swaying, shadows lengthening. Your rational mind tries to wrest control, listing mundane explanations for every twitch and whisper. Yet a small, stubborn part of you thrills at being on the brink of something more. History hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to piece it together. Your wanderings bring you to an old stone memorial carved with faded characters. To those who rest beneath these waves, you kneel to brush away moss and dirt, revealing part of a date carved long ago. 2 digits and half of another. You can't read the full year, but the style of carving hints at centuries gone. You close your eyes and place your hand on the cool stone, imagining the hands that etched these letters. You feel a pang of connection, as though time itself has curved around you, pressing you into this moment, urging you to remember what was lost. Night wraps around the lake like a velvet cloak, and the first stars wink into existence overhead. A night heron wades silently near the shore, its reflection rippling in the lantern glow. You catch your breath, watching as it drops its head, beak cutting through the water's skin, searching for prey. The lake seems alive, its surface barely disturbed, yet pulsing with hidden movement. You lean back against the cool stone, knees drawn to your chest, and wonder how long you could survive underwater, tracing every carved edge of a drowned roof. You rise, curiosity outweighing caution, and continue along a faint animal path into taller grasses. Each step leaves a small depression, like an imprint of your own boldness. The deeper you go, the more you sense familiar shapes emerging from the dark. Stones arranged in straight lines, too deliberate for chance. You follow them, weaving between reeds and over mossy rocks until you glimpse the outline of a low wall, half buried and slick with lake sediment. A thrill of triumph surges through you. Proof that the legends are more than stories, that a city truly sleeps beneath these waters. Hands trembling, you trace the mossy top of the wall, feeling pits and grooves carved by tools long rusted away. You imagine laborers hauling stone blocks, chiseling mortar between them, raising gates and towers under the same moon that now casts silver ribbons across the lake. The air here tastes like salt and secrets. Your fingertips smear with greenish muck, and you wipe them on your trousers, cursing softly. Somehow, the mess feels right, like you're the first person in centuries to touch this silent architecture. Your thoughts drift to the old villagers you left behind. The fisherman with his lantern, the grandmother by her hearth, the children pointing at ghostly lights. Each of them bears a shard of this story, like pieces of a fractured mirror. You imagine gathering them all, fitting shards into a clear reflection of a world lost to time. If only someone could map every stone, every column, every echo, then maybe the city would reclaim its story, resurfacing in memory before it rises from the depths. Behind you, a soft chime ripples across the water. You freeze, breath lodged in your throat. The sound is clearer now, like a bronze bell swung by unseen hands, each toll lingering longer than the last. You crouch beside the wall, pressing your ear to the damp stone, searching for vibrations. Instead, you feel only silence, but the ringing continues in your mind, insistent and melancholic. It seems to call your name, urging you to remember what you came to forget, that this lake holds more than fish and reeds, that beneath its placid face lies a city with stories to tell. You climb to your feet and turn toward the water, eyes straining to see beyond the waves. Moonlight slices through the darkness, illuminating ripples that trace straight lines across the lake's surface. A grid pattern that mimics streets buried below. Your heart races. You realize that every map, every whispered myth, every faded carving has pointed to this moment. Discovery unfolding like a slow-motion dream. You step into the shallows again, water rising to your shins, and you follow those luminous lines, each one a pathway to secrets sunken long ago. Suddenly, your foot slips on an unseen ledge, and you pitch forward, sprawling into the cold embrace of the lake. Water surges over your head, filling your lungs with icy regret. You rise before dawn, the remnants of last night's embers still warm under your palms. The room is hushed, save for the soft crackle of dying coals and the low murmur of villagers stirring outside. Through a narrow window, you glimpse wisps of mist hovering above the lake, silver ribbons drifting across a glassy mirror. You pull on damp trousers, still carrying the chill from your late-night plunge, and step into the pre-dawn chill, lantern in hand. The fisherman waits on the wooden plank that serves as a pier, his broad shoulders hunched against the cold. His silhouette is a familiar comfort now, a guide to mysteries that swim just below Sailimu's surface. He greets you with a grunt and a nod, his weather-beaten face half hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Without a word, he casts his net into the still water, the ropes slipping through his calloused fingers like slow-moving serpents. You watch the arcs of the netted ropes disappear beneath the surface. Somewhere down there, among silt and stone, lies the same submerged city that whispered to you last night. Together you wait in silence. The only sounds are the susurrus of water lapping at the wooden posts and the distant call of a loon greeting the morning. Minutes stretch into a slow symphony of expectation. The fisherman begins to haul, muscles rippling beneath faded tweed as he draws the net inch by inch. You step closer, boots creaking on damp wood. Small fish glint in the lantern glow as they wriggle in the mesh. You help by collecting them in a woven basket, flicking each silvery body back into the lake with a gentle gesture. It feels almost reverent, each return an offering to the water that holds so many secrets. Occasionally, your fingers brush against something larger and stranger. A lump that isn't fish or rock, something flattened and carved. "Hold on there," he mutters, voice low as the net tightens around an unseen obstacle. He shifts his weight, leaning back to gain leverage. You brace yourself, feet planted wide, and grasp the net's edge. A groan of wood and rope follows, and then a sudden lurch as the snag gives way. Water sloshes over the pier, drenching your boots. You gasp, heart thudding, as the net surges upward, heavy and waterlogged. When the net breaks the surface, you freeze. It's not a log, not driftwood. Instead, tangled among silta mesh, is a fragment of stone, smooth-edged, yet bearing the faintest ridge of carving. You kneel, lantern held close, and brush away mud to reveal a delicate floral motif, petals curling into each other with purpose and symmetry. It feels impossibly refined for something dragged from a lake. You trace the carving with a careful fingertip, wondering who sculpted it, what hands pressed chisel to stone in a workshop long buried by centuries of water and silt. The fisherman's rough laugh breaks your reverie. "You like that?" he asks, lifting the net so you can see the full shape. A flat slab about the size of a dinner platter, edges rounded by time but inscribed with a geometric border. He hauls it higher and drops it at your feet with surprising gentleness. "Found that near the old back wall last week." His voice is matter-of-fact, as though finding carved stone in a fishing net is as ordinary as catching trout. You retrieve the basket of fish, setting it aside, and kneel properly to inspect the slab. The floral design repeats in a rhythmic pattern. You count 7 petals, 7 petals, 7, each cluster linked by a narrow vine. It reminds you of Byzantine mosaics or palace friezes in some sun-drenched Mediterranean ruin. The thought prickles at the back of your neck. How did something like this end up beneath a high-altitude lake in Xinjiang? You look at the fisherman, whose eyes gleam in the lantern light. "This lake's full of surprises, friend," he says, voice soft. "But you won't see much if you only drag nets. You need to know where to look." He reaches into a leather pouch slung at his side, pulling out a few strands of golden thread, stiff with age. You lean forward as he hands you a tangle of textile, threads woven into a pattern that echoes the stone slab's floral border. The colors are muted, faded saffron, moss green, but the weave is fine, almost imperceptible beneath your thumb. "Gold for the nobles," he murmurs, "and silk for their ladies, used to decorate balconies and halls." You cradle the threads as though they might crumble, marveling at the idea that these fragile fibers survived decades submerged in cold water. A gull cries overhead, its echo bouncing off distant peaks. The lake stretches around you, motionless except for the concentric circles rippling from your lantern-lit pier. You notice the net's other catch. Shards of pottery, tiny curved fragments glazed in deep cobalt blue and earthen ochre. You gather them into your palm, turning each grimy chip over to catch traces of brushstroke or glaze. Each shard is a fingerprint of a long-lost civilization, domestic life frozen beneath the lake's pressure, preserved in fragments of bowls, plates, and perhaps jars that held wine or pickled fruits. The fisherman stands and beckons you to rise. "Let's walk," he says, jerking his chin toward a narrow path that winds around the lake's shore. You sling the net over your shoulder, careful to cradle the heavy stone slab in one arm. The thread and pottery shards you tuck into your coat pocket. You follow him along ankle-high grasses slick with dew, each blade bending under your steps, releasing droplets that glint like diamonds in the lantern glow. The path curves inland, rising slightly as it threads between two rocky outcrops. In the dim light, you notice a shallow indentation in the rock, a shallow basin carved by hands both deliberate and ancient. He stops beside the basin and crouches, dipping his lantern to illuminate its hollow. Inside, water has pooled and turned to ice at the edges. The basin's lip bears a shallow groove, as though water once overflowed, spilling over into ritual channels. You crouch too, pressing a gloved hand against the cold rock. The surface is worn smooth where centuries of water have washed over it. You run your fingers along an etched symbol, a crescent shape intersected by a single vertical line. It could be a letter, a pictogram, or a marker for water flow. You sketch the symbol in your mind. Moon above a pillar, a sign of worship, perhaps, for gods of water and moonlight. Place offerings here, the fisherman says, voice low as if reciting from memory. He reaches into his coat and withdraws a small wrapped parcel. You watch as he unwraps a handful of dried apricots, setting them carefully in the basin. Sweet things for the lake spirits, he explains. They demand respect and expect their due. He steps back, head bowed, and closes his eyes. You follow his lead, exhaling in a slow breath and bowing your head. The lake beyond looks on impassively, its surface smooth as glass. You half expect ripples to form, but the basin remains still, silent witness to centuries of similar offerings. When the fisherman stands, he nods at you. Eat a few, he says, handing you the remaining apricots. Part of the practice. The fruit is chewy, tangy, and surprisingly sweet, a vivid contrast to the cold air. You chew slowly, tasting the smoky earth and sugar concentrate, flavor that traveled through time, as if plucked from an orchard long ago. Each bite seems to tether you closer to the land and its stories, making you more certain of the lake's depths and desires. He gestures toward the path. Come, he says. There's a place I want to show you. A spot where my net once snagged something much larger. You follow him, each footfall muffled by moss that carpets the ground. The path dips and curves around gnarled juniper trees whose roots snake across the trail. You brush aside low-hanging branches, needles scratching at your cuffs. The air smells of pine resin and cold stone, with an undercurrent of something ancient and alive. Eventually, the trees recede, revealing a small cove. A half-submerged wall juts from the shore, its blocks arranged in rows far too precise for natural rock. Moss and lichen claim the upper tiers, while barnacles cling to the submerged stones. You step closer, water lapping at your ankles, and kneel beside the wall. It feels impossibly solid, the stone cold and dense, even through your gloves. You run your hand along the carved edge, noting how each block fits seamlessly into the next, like pieces of a massive jigsaw puzzle. V-shaped notches line the top column, perhaps for wooden beams that once supported an overhang or balcony. The fisherman cradles the net's stone slab against the wall, sliding it between two blocks as though fitting a missing puzzle piece. You hold your breath, waiting for some sign. An echo, a tremor, a shift in the wind. But the lake remains still, as though holding its breath too. Then, without warning, the slab slides home with a dull click. You step back, heart hammering, and watch as the net's weight settles the piece into. You slip through the village before midnight, lantern bobbing in one hand, the other clutching a length of rope you brought just in case. The air carries the hush of expectation, as though the world itself holds its breath. Village lights recede behind you and the scent of wood smoke fades, replaced by the cool tang of water vapor rising from Sailimu's surface. The moon hovers high and full, a pale guardian illuminating the landscape in silver. Its reflection quivers on the lake like a living thing, beckoning you closer. You reach the shore where the fisherman's old skiff rests against a low stone jetty, its paint peeling and oars laid neatly across the thwarts. You push off lightly and settle onto the bench, lantern tucked under your chin so its glow won't blind you. With a gentle shove, you send the boat gliding into the night, oars whispering against the water. Each stroke carries you farther from the safety of land and into the lantern-lit lattice of moonbeams that dance upon the lake's surface. As you row, your breath clouds before you, drifting upward and dissolving into the night. The village is a distant echo now, its faint glow a promise of home, and all around stretches the liquid plain, as dark and boundless as the sky. You drift in silence, broken only by the soft hiss of oarlocks and the slap of blade against water. Above, the moon's pale light reveals faint ripples that fan outward, like footprints left by some unseen creature beneath the surface. You pause your rowing and let the boat drift. Lantern light trembles against the gunwale, and you lean forward, peering into the depths. Water so clear it seems crystalline, until black tendrils of shadow swirl just beyond your vision. Somewhere down there, hidden spires and halls wait in patient ruin, reaching for moonlight that can never quite touch them. You press a hand against the cool wood of the hull, feeling its grain under your palm, reminding yourself of something solid in a world built on shifting reflections. Then you see it, a silhouette rising from the lake floor, dark against silver, a jagged spine that pierces the moon's gleam. A cathedral spire, or so your heart insists, slender and tapering, crowned with what might have been carved finials now worn ragged by time and water. It stands alone, rooted in depths perhaps 20 paces from your boat, its reflection painting a second spire beneath the surface. Your pulse quickens. This is no drifting log or half-submerged branch. This is architecture. You dip the oars again, guiding the skiff toward that distant spike of stone. As you approach, the water's color deepens around you, shifting from pale silver to gunmetal gray. Beneath your lantern's glow, you glimpse broken columns and window arches scattered like fallen teeth around the spire's base. Moss and algae carpet every surface, filaments trailing like ghostly banners. Your breath hitches with wonder, and you lean farther over the side, heart hammering, toes curling against the boat's floorboards. Reaching the spire, you bring the skiff close enough to snag the rope, a length of frayed hemp tied around one of the finials. You secure the other end to your waist, knotting it around a belt loop for safety, an improvised lifeline to the world above. Lantern balanced in your free hand, you climb over the gunwale, dropping into ankle-deep water. It's colder than expected, a shock that rattles your bones, but you press on, each step tentative against unseen rocks and shifting silt. You stand before the spire's base, a squat heavy mass of stone blocks that widen as they descend into the lakebed. Water laps at your knees, ripples distorting the lantern's reflection into wavy streaks of light. You shine the lantern over the masonry. The blocks fit together with such precision they look almost seamless, like a single monolith carved to mimic joints. Intricate patterns curve across the stone. Stylized vines, rosettes, and interlaced knots that speak of craftsmanship beyond mere practicality. You crouch and trace a finger over a petal motif, surprised at how smooth it feels, the stone worn almost polished by centuries of water brushing past. Above you, the spire towers like a needle, but you sense a slight lean, as though gravity and time conspired to bend it toward the lake bed. You imagine climbing higher, stepping across submerged ledges, torch in hand, but rational thought warns of slippery stones and unknown falls. Instead, you settle at the waterline, balancing your lantern on a protruding block to free both hands. Ripples catch the light, flickering like restless sprites dancing over carved faces. You lean in closer and notice a shallow doorway carved into the stone, its lintel half buried in silt. The portal is just tall enough for you to slip through if you stoop. Above it, an arch drilled with tiny holes might once have held a grill or wooden screen. Now you see nothing but darkness beyond. Your heartbeat thunders in your ears as you consider what lies inside. A chamber preserved underwater like a ghost ship in reverse. Taking a steadying breath, you retrieve a length of waxed cloth from your coat and wrap it around the lantern's handle to protect your grip from slipping. With careful steps you wade into the recess, water rising to your waist. The lantern's glow stretches a few feet, illuminating a tiny vestibule whose walls curve inward, forming a narrow tunnel that slopes down. Water cloaks everything. Surfaces glisten, and small fish dart through shafts of light, startled by your intrusion. You advance, ducking beneath a low lintel until the tunnel opens into a larger chamber. You surface, taking in a high vaulted ceiling descending from unseen heights. Columns line the sides, each carved with fluting and capitals shaped like lotus buds. The air feels weightless here, and every exhalation sends bubbles rising toward the surface far above. You watch them ascend, popping in tiny silver rings before they vanish into the lantern's sphere. You steady yourself against a column and sweep the lantern in a slow circle. Amid the dim, you make out an apse at the far end, its walls decorated with relief carvings half eroded by time. You straddle a submerged step and lean nearer. Sunken figures in flowing robes, arms outstretched as if in perpetual benediction, their faces calm and serene. It's an underwater sanctuary, frozen in a moment of worship carried to its watery tomb. For a moment you simply stare, awestruck. The stones resonate with silence, as though the chamber holds its breath. You imagine voices rising in chorus, prayers offered by candlelight, long before the lake reclaimed its own. The thought tugs at your heart. This space was once alive with worship, ceremony, wonder. Now it lies in eerie repose, waiting for someone to listen again. Your fingers brush against the curve of a column, startling a cluster of tiny snails that cling like pearls. They cling fast, unperturbed by your touch. You recall how the fisherman spoke of offerings placed at sacred spots. Perhaps this was one. You search your pockets and retrieve a few pebbles you collected on the shore, smooth and multicolored. You release them one by one into the water, watching them tumble along the stone floor until they rest at the foot of a carved altar platform. You pace slowly down the central nave, water swirling around your torso. The lantern's light pulses against the walls, revealing niches that once held statuary. One niche still cradles a figure, an upright form hewn from the same stone, head missing, shoulders draped in carved fabric. Water-worn, its stony robes seem to float in suspended animation. You crouch and run a hand across its chest, noticing a tiny inscription in an unfamiliar script. 3 vertical strokes intersected by a single horizontal line. You sketch it in your mind, committing its pattern to memory. Above the niche, the vault forms a pointed arch, framing the last rays of moonlight that filter in from a gap high above. That shaft of light sketches a perfect circle on the floor, a halo of pale luminescence. You drift into that circle and stand still, feeling the soft current tug at you from below. Ripples form concentric rings, distorting the halo until it fractures into glimmering shards. You shine the lantern upward, aiming at the dark expanse where the spire's peak should be. Instead of solid stone, you see only darkness, as if the chamber stretches ever higher, swallowed in pitch. You lean back, feeling the water's gentle pressure around you, and whisper into the gloom, "I see you." Your voice echoes, muffled and distant, and for a heartbeat you sense something shift. A vibration through the water, subtle as a heartbeat. Your pulse jumps. You realize you've been here too long. The lantern flickers. You tug at the rope tied around the finial outside. Feels taut, reminding you of earth above. You can't linger or risk losing your lifeline. You turn and wade back toward the tunnel's mouth, lantern held high. A small school of minnows darts around your legs, flickering silver in the beam. You step into the passage, chest heaving with adrenaline, and push through the lintel back into open water. Above you, the spire's silhouette looms like a cathedral lost in the depths. You wake late the next morning to the hiss of tea leaves steeping and the soft creak of floorboards outside your door. The lantern's last glow lingers in the guttering wick beside your bedroll, and you stretch, every muscle still humming from yesterday's plunge into the underwater cathedral. Your coat, damp at the hem, hangs over a chair, threaded with silt and aquatic residue. You rub sleep from your eyes, trying not to think about the spider of aches crawling across your shoulders. You pad down the narrow corridor toward the hearth, where the fisherman stands pouring steaming tea into two mismatched cups. He nods without looking up. "The scholar's house," he says, voice gruff but meant as an invitation. "He's been expecting you since before dawn." You lift your cup, the herbal bitterness filling your lungful of air with something sharp and grounding. You swallow, momentarily convinced that this tea might cancel out the chill from the lake. Then, with a decisive sip, you sling your coat back on and follow him through twisting lanes dusted with straw and pine needles. The scholar's home crouches at the edge of the village like a tortoise drawn in ink. Low stone walls, heavy wooden door, a small courtyard strewn with pots of withered herbs. You step inside beneath a lintel so low you have to duck, and immediately your nose fills with a cloud of dust and aged paper. Shelves sag under the weight of leather-bound tomes, rolled parchments tied with fraying ribbon, and glass vials containing half-fossilized specimens. Fish scales, snail shells, curling tendrils of ancient algae. Candlelight flickers in wall sconces, casting everything in a lazy amber haze that makes shadows writhe like living things. Behind a massive desk cluttered with quills, ink pots, and open volumes, the scholar sits like a puppeteer among his strings. He's an older man, hair white enough to glow in the lantern light, and his spectacles perch on the tip of a prominent nose. His fingers are stained with ink and his robes bear tiny flecks of parchment dust. He looks at you with piercing blue eyes that seem to have seen more phantoms and ruins than you could imagine. "So," he says, voice high and measured, "you've seen the spire and the wall. Are you ready for something more permanent?" You nod, heart speeding as you imagine what awaits. He gestures at an oak chest bound with iron. "Then come," he says, and you step forward, knocking your knee on a corner of the desk. Papers flutter to the floor like startled birds. You mutter an apology and bend to scoop them up, careful to keep your fingers from grazing the edges of fragile scrolls. The scholar huffs, but not unkindly. He unlocks the chest with a large skeleton key and lifts the lid. Inside lies a single scroll, wrapped in faded silk and stained with age. He lifts it gently, as though it were alive, and places it on the desk before you. The silk falls away, revealing yellowed parchment covered in delicate, flowing script and rough pencil sketches. You crouch beside the desk, lantern tucked under your arm, and trace the sinuous lines that depict rooftops submerged in water, annotated with symbols you don't yet understand. "Be careful not to breathe on it," the scholar warns, adjusting his glasses and flicking a speck of dust from the scroll's edge. "This map," he says, voice hushed, "is nearly as old as the city itself." You glance up at him. "How did you come by it?" He folds his hands, eyes shadowed. "A century ago, a traveling monk brought it from the western steppes. He claimed he found it hidden in a mountain shrine after a particularly harsh winter. No one believed him, so he sold it for wine money. It passed through many hands before I acquired it." You unroll the scroll further, careful not to let it snap back. The parchment crackles like brittle ice. The drawing shows a bird's-eye view of a lakeside settlement, rooftops and towers sketched in perspective as if the artist hovered above. Around the edges are blocks of text in a script that slants like reeds in the wind, annotations on depth, on stone types, on points of entry. You run a fingertip over a notation that reads something like "Deep Gate," beside a line that runs straight into the water. A thrill snakes through your spine. Here is what you've been searching for. Proof that the city's layout was known long ago, when memory was still fresh. "See here," the scholar says, tapping a faded corner where a small inset shows a detail of the main harbor. "These mooring posts once rose above the water, hosting boats and barges carrying silk and spices. Now they're lost to time, but their foundations cling to rock. He rustles a page as he lifts it closer to his face, squinting through his spectacles. The script is archaic Turkic mixed with Buddhist mantras. It implies the city was both a trading hub and a pilgrimage site. You look at the sketches. Slender columns jut from whirling currents, connecting towers by stone bridges that now lie submerged. You imagine walking those bridges, past stone lions carved into guard posts, feeling the same breeze you feel now but from 2,000 years ago. You tap one of the rooftop outlines, and the scholar's pen flutters into your hand. Self-conscious, you drop it back onto the desk. He laughs. A soft, surprising sound. "Go ahead," he says. "Trace it. It helps to remember." You draw a shaky line around the sketch, following the contours of a dome topped by a lotus carving, and your gaze lifts to meet his. He nods approvingly. When you release the scroll, it ripples like water settling after a storm. You notice a watermark in the parchment, a lotus enclosed in a circle. "That's the emblem of a sect that vanished a millennium ago," the scholar explains. "They were said to guard the city's secrets." You run your thumb over the faint symbol, thinking of the bell that tolled beneath the moon, the fisherman's offerings in the carved basin, the clusters of lantern light that drifted in the frozen depths. All these threads intertwine here, on this single sheet of parchment. You pause to blow away a wisp of dust that lands on the scroll. A sneeze threatens, and you cup your hand over your mouth, nearly smudging ink. The scholar shushes you with a bemused look. "If you must sneeze," he says, "sneeze into your elbow." You crick your neck, embarrassed, but he continues. "We need to translate the text. I have copies of an old Turkic Buddhist lexicon, but it's incomplete. You might help me fill in gaps." He points to a passage describing a ritual, offerings of dried fruits and incense placed at 4 cardinal points around the lake. You're already familiar with 2 of them, the basin in the Fisher's Cove and the cathedral spire, but the other 2 remain elusive. He guffaws at your puzzled expression. "Don't look so grim," he says. "Part of the fun is in the chase." He reaches into a drawer and pulls out 2 more parchments covered in scribbles. Notes he's taken over years of study. A faint smile crosses his lips. "I've been holed up here too long," he admits. "I need your eyes, your energy. You've seen more of the lake firsthand than any dry-faced scholar in a century." You lean back in the chair, legs stretched under the desk, imagining the map's cardinal points blinking like lanterns in the dark. The sun filters through a narrow window, glancing off the scholar's spectacles and scattering light across the scroll. Dust motes drift through the beam like tiny dancers, oblivious to the centuries they represent. You close your eyes and picture the city beneath. Rooftops sloping into crystal currents, towers crowned with lotus finials, hidden chambers awaiting your discovery. The scholar settles on a stool beside you and dips a quill into ink. "Let's begin," he says. "Transliterate the titles here." He nudges the scroll toward you. You uncurl it to reveal a block of text that reads more like poetry than instruction. The script spirals, punctuated by dots and strokes that could be letters or decorative flourishes. You trace each character with a fingertip, marveling at the grace of the handwriting. Bold strokes and dainty curls, ink faded to a perfect sepia. As you copy it onto a clean sheet, you feel the weight of history in every letter. Over the next hour, you and the scholar work in quiet concentration. He recites possible translations under his breath: Watergate, Moon Harbor, Hall of Petitions, and you write, cross-referencing with his lexicon. Occasionally, one of you finds a phrase that clicks: Temple of the Silent Buddha, beside a sketch of a low domed structure, Chamber of Reflections, inscribed near a long colonnade. Each translation feels like pulling a secret from the lake's depths. Your arm begins to ache from writing, and your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten since dawn. You glance at a near-empty cheese rind and a handful of stale bread on the desk. The scholar points to them with a grin. "Fuel," he says. "You'll need it." You break off a piece of bread, nibble, and sip tea, mind buzzing with the thrill of decipherment. You almost laugh at yourself. Here you are, tattooed with lake water and moss, hunched over ancient scrolls in a scholar's dusty study. If you forget the mud and silt under your nails, you might think you're in some grand archive in a distant city. Rather than a bump, you rise before the moon dips behind the distant peaks, the night air crisp enough to bite exposed skin. You pull on your heaviest coat, wrap a wool scarf around your neck, and tuck a flickering lantern into its crook. Your breath puffs in ghostly clouds as you step outside the fisherman's cottage, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. The village lies silent, shuttered windows dark against the faint glow of lanterns in the distance. You wrap your palms around the lantern's handle, letting its wavering flames steady your nerves. Tonight, you travel to the frozen flats, where the lake's glossy surface stiffens to ice and something beneath waits, glowing with an eerie blue fire. You follow the narrow trail along the shore, each step measured in the hush of night. The scholar's map sits heavy in your coat pocket, its cardinal points marked in neat circles. This fifth point lies where the flats stretch wide, ice so thin in places that wind-torn reeds poke through in skeletal tufts. A slender ribbon of moonlight guides your path, silvering frost-crusted pines and rime-coated grasses alike. You pull your scarf tight and imagine the hush beneath the ice. Sunken rooftops and halls cloaked in darkness, awaiting discovery. The path rounds a low promontory, and the flats open before you. A vast plain of ice, unbroken as far as you can see, save for a few jagged cracks glinting like lightning. You step onto the ice's edge, testing it with the toe of your boot. It holds. A thin sheet, glassy and smooth, that stretches into shadowed distance. Each cautious footfall echoes like a drumbeat, accompanied by the soft hiss of breath escaping frozen sleeves. You walk forward, lantern held low, its light trembling across the ice in concentric circles. Here and there, water seethes beneath the ice, tiny fissures that reveal dark pools and swirling currents below. You kneel beside one such crack, pressing a gloved finger against the icy lip. The cold seeps through your glove, sharpening your senses. Leaning close, you peer down into the depths. A soft pulse of light glimmers beneath, azure blue, like a lantern in an underwater cathedral. It flickers, then fades, leaving only darkness. You draw back, heart racing. You remember the fisherman's tales of ghost lights that danced under moonlit ice. Tonight, you will see them for yourself. You rise and step away, wandering toward a wider fissure, a yawning chasm that cuts across the flats like a scar. Lantern held aloft, you approach its edge, careful not to tip into the void. Below, crystalline water reflects your lantern flame as two trembling lights, ghostly twins flickering in time. You hear a distant creak, the ice groaning under its own weight. You steady yourself, planting both feet firmly, chest tightening with anticipation. From your pocket, you draw a small hammer, nothing more than a stout rock with a wrapped handle, but tonight it is your key. You position it at the lip of the fissure and raise your arm, breath held. The first strike is a sharp crack, and a jagged piece of ice splinters free, clinking into the water. You steady the lamp while you clear away the broken shards with gloved hands, each fragment sliding into the darkness below. At last, a hole yawns wide enough to peer through without distortion. You kneel, leaning over the opening. Your lantern light spills onto the ice's underside, illuminating the depths below. There, drifting like spirits in slow dance, are the frozen blue flames. They shimmer and coil, slender tongues of light that curl against the dark water. Each pulse seems to breathe, glowing brighter, then dimming, in a rhythm that mimics your own heartbeat. You blink, sure it's an illusion, but the lights remain, flickering with uncanny intelligence. You pull back, heart pounding, and take in the scene. Beneath the ice, outlines emerge. Archways and vaults carved from stone, now veiled in icy mist. The blue flames cling to the edges of these shapes, illuminating patterns of filigree and knotwork. You imagine those patterns matching the carvings on the cathedral spire and the carved slab from the fisherman's net. The lake has spread its own lanterns, tiny will-o'-the-wisps that mark hidden thresholds. Your breath hitches as one flame drifts upward, brushing the ice's underside like a fingertip. It leaves a faint, glowing trace before flickering out. You lean forward again, straining to catch another spark. The lantern at your side trembles in its cradle. You close your eyes for a moment and remember the scholar's words. Offerings at the 4 points. You pat your coat pocket, feeling the tangle of golden threads and pottery shards within. Tonight, you will honor the lake's spirits. You retrieve the threads first, muted saffron and moss green, and hold them over the hole. The lantern's glow catches them, making them glow like embers. Carefully, you lower the threads into the water, watching as they drift downward, caught for a moment in the pale blue light before sinking into shadow. The moment they disappear, a ripple spreads across the ice above the hole, distorting both lantern reflection and moonbeam alike. You tense, expecting a response. A tremor, a glow, but only the hush remains. Next, you thread your fingers through the pottery shards. Fragments glazed cobalt and ochre, and one by one release them into the dark water. Each shard splashes softly, sending a silence ringing through the crack. You imagine the shards resting on ancient tiles, a ghostly mosaic strewn across stone floors. With each offering, the frozen blue flames flicker brighter for a heartbeat, then fade to reveal more of the submerged walls and columns. You linger, mesmerized, until the lantern's flame guttering warns of its own sacrifice to cold. You tuck the lantern closer and rise, careful not to break the fragile tunnel beneath your feet. You take a few shaky steps back and kneel by the ice's edge, tracing the outlines of a submerged arch you can just make out. You press your palm against the ice, the smooth surface surprisingly warm where the blue lights pooled. You whisper, "Thank you," into the night, voice muffled by scarf and ice. Behind you, a whistle of wind creeps across the flats, carrying a thin crackle that sounds like applause. You shiver, wondering if the lake itself applauds your tribute. You dust frost from your gloves and survey the field of glittering fishers. Tiny blue lights still hover beneath ice, as if too mesmerized to leave. You imagine returning at dawn, marking each where you offered, plotting them against your map of cardinal points. Your fingers brush against the final offering. A silver coin you carry for luck, its surface etched with a crescent moon. You hold it aloft, as though making a silent toast to whatever city slumbers below. Then you drop it, its hollow ring echoing through the void. For a moment, the ice vibrates, and a single column of deep blue light surges beneath the coin's landing spot, illuminating a perfect circle of darkness around it. It pulses once, then settles into steady glow. You exhale, the breath visible in the lamp's halo. The flat's silent grace feels like a benediction, an acknowledgement from the lake. You remain kneeling, head bowed, absorbing the echo of blue flames. Each ember-bright flicker feels like a word, a fragment of a message. We are here. Remember us. Reluctantly, you rise and brush snow from your knees. You step gingerly back toward the shoreline, boots skittering on ice slick with frost. The moon has dipped lower, but its light still guides you, casting long shadows and shimmering patterns on the frozen canvas. You follow the trail of broken shards and offering spots, committed to memory for when you return to the scholar's house. As you near solid ground, the ice changes texture, clear sheet giving way to slushy fringes. You pause and look back. The flats stretch wide, dotted with fissures glowing faintly like stars trapped in crystal. The giant lake seems to be a sky turned upside down, with blue constellations pulsing in place. You feel small, awed, humbled by this secret realm you've awakened, however briefly. You step off the ice and onto pebbled shore, the crunch echoing in a world that still buzzes with hidden life. The lantern's flame steadies in your grip. You look at your offering's empty pockets. Golden thread gone, shards and coin vanished into depths. Yet you carry a new offering in your heart, a promise to continue piecing together the drowned city's story. You stow the scholar's map back in your coat, careful not to crease its fragile folds. Ahead, the village lights glow like fireflies in the gathering dawn. You begin the trek back, each step heavier than before, laden with images of ghostly blue flames dancing beneath ice. The silence of the frozen flats follows you, pressing gently on your shoulders, a reminder that the lake's secrets run deeper than any net or scroll can reveal. By the time you reach the hearthlit cottage, Lantern's wick low and oil nearly spent. You are hollowed and full all at once. Emptied of fear, filled with wonder. You slide inside, drop the lantern beside the fire, and sink on. You follow a narrow trail into the pines just after dusk. Lantern in hand and heart still humming from the frozen flats' blue fires. The path winds deeper into the forest, needles crackling underfoot, and the smoky scent of your campfire lures you like a moth to its flame. When you crest a gentle rise, you see him, a lone traveler seated on a flat stone beside a ring of smoldering logs. Beside him lies a canvas satchel bulging with unlabeled bottles, a battered field hammer, and a leather-bound notebook that looks as weathered as the man himself. He looks up at you, eyes reflecting embers, and gives a slow nod. You settle on a fallen log across the flames, brushing pine needles from your coat. The lantern's glow joins the firelight, and you lift your knees, warming cold bones. He gestures to the log beside him, patting it as if inviting conversation. Above, starlight filters through branches, and the night hums with cicada trills and distant owl calls. The rustic hush sets your nerves at ease. You feel like a conspirator in a secret tale. He introduces himself with a crooked smile. "Name's Iskander," he says, voice low and roughened by travel and tobacco smoke. You offer your own name and a flask of herbal tea you brewed at dawn. He accepts it with a grateful nod, blowing on the rim of the cup before taking a careful sip. You pass it back and sit forward, lantern jostling in your hand. Now, he says, the real tale begins. He tells you he's traveled far across steppe and desert to study the geology of high-altitude lakes. They hold archives, he explains, flicking a finger through smoke rings. If you know how to read sediment, you can unravel centuries in each layer. He taps his hammer against a tin pan, making a hollow ring. But Sailimu, he says, eyes glinting. She has her own archives. Stone towers beneath her water, stacked one upon another, like pages in a submerged book. You lean in, catching the ember glow in his weathered features. He pauses, then draws from his satchel a handful of small rock fragments, crumbly bits of sandstone mottled with dark crystals. You trace the grains with your finger. Found these near the north shore, where the lake shallows, he murmurs. At first glance, you'd swear they're natural, just bits of slate or shale. But see these straight edges? These corners? He turns a fragment so the lantern light slips across a near-perfect right angle. Man-worked. Blocks that fit together, if only you could find the rest. Your pulse quickens as you imagine those blocks forming towers under the waves. He stacks a few fragments to demonstrate a corner. Two pieces meeting at 90 degrees, mortar lines etched in faint grooves. Local legends speak of spires and temples down there. He says, voice hushed as if afraid the lake might overhear. But no one believed it until I found this. He flips open his notebook to a rough sketch. A column capped with a lotus bud, half submerged, drawn with shaky pencil strokes. Beside it, a note reads depth, 18 m, coordinates approximate. You trace the lines, imagining the column rising like a silent sentinel from the lakebed. Saw it through the ice. He continues, lowering his voice. In winter, when the flats froze over, I drilled through the ice to lower a weighted line. Beneath the frozen surface, I felt a hollow thunk. Stone. He pauses, stirring the last of his tea. That's when I knew. This isn't just geology. It's history. You lean back, lantern flame flickering over pale starlit sky. The crackle of the fire seems to sync with your heartbeat. But why here? You ask. Why build stone towers in a place so high, so cold? He taps his notebook's binding. That's the mystery. Sediment cores tell me this was once a fertile valley, warmer, greener, visited by caravans. Then, perhaps a cataclysm, earthquake or flood, raised the waters, submerging the city. The towers, temples, columns remained, waiting beneath the lake. He reaches into his satchel again, pulling out a narrow glass vial filled with cloudy water and fine silt. I scooped this from a depth of 20 meters, he explains, tipping the bottle to let pale brown particles swirl in the lantern glow. Sediment here shows abrupt shifts, layers of clay and volcanic ash. Something sudden changed this lake's nature. He taps the glass. Perhaps a landslide from the rim, burying fields and homes, or a shift in river flow that drowned the city. You close your eyes for a moment, picturing that ancient valley, orchards in bloom, traders' caravans stretching across a dusty plain, spires shining in sunlight. Then the earth rumbles, walls collapse, and waters rush in like a living tide, swallowing everything in their path. You shiver and rub your arms. Whether from cold or the tale, you can't tell. He chuckles softly at your wide-eyed expression. "Don't worry," he says. "This was centuries ago. The water's calm now, mostly." He tosses the vial back into his satchel, then unfolds a small leather pouch. Inside, you find a handful of chipped pottery and a few curved tiles glazed in ochre. He holds them up to the firelight, their colors muted but discernible. Tiles from a temple roof, rounded pieces that once fit together in ornate patterns. Found near that same spot. You twist a shard between thumb and forefinger, imagining its place in a ceremonial hall. A dry leaf drifts down onto the fire and pops, sending tiny embers dancing skyward. The forest seems to lean closer, listening in. You sense something alive beneath the pines, a lingering presence of those who built these towers before the lake reclaimed them. Iskander points beyond the campfire, toward the lake's distant shimmer. "If you look from the shore at sunrise," he says, "when the light strikes the water just right, you'll see faint outlines, vertical lines that don't belong to reeds or ripples. Those are the towers catching the sun's first rays." He tilts his head, recalling the sight. They look like ghostly columns rising through mist. You promise to watch at dawn, heart tight with anticipation. He shifts the conversation toward method. "If you want to see more, you'll need simple tools. Weighted lines to gauge depth, a bag to pull up stones, basic goggles to peer below the surface when the water's clear. No fancy gadgets, just muscle and patience." He winks, makes you appreciate the old ways. The rumor was that monks once lived here, guided only by faith and candlelight, to retrieve relics for their temples. You smile at the image of robed monks breaching the water's skin, lantern clutched tight, descending into the dark realm below. You imagine their prayers echoing off submerged arches, their lantern beams skipping among columns as they searched for sacred objects. The thought sends a thrill through you. The fire burns lower, casting long shadows through the clearing. You rise to stretch cramped limbs and offer to replenish the woodpile. He accepts, pointing toward a nearby stand of deadfall. You gather a few logs and toss them onto the embers, sparks riding upward like golden fireflies. As you work, you listen to him continue. Stories of stacks of stone that defy natural formation, of corners too precise to be anything but deliberate. He describes one circular tower, 20 feet wide, ringed with niches that once held statues. "Like the spokes of a wheel," he says, "all pointing inward to a central altar." You poke at the fire with a stick, sending embers drifting across the clearing. A soft breeze stirs pine needles, and the air smells of resin and moss. You feel a kinship with Iskander, a fellow seeker, drawn to the lake's silent depths. He speaks of nights spent on the frozen flats, drilling holes and lowering weighted lamps on ropes, the lamps glowing blue against submerged masonry. You nod, recalling the blue flames you saw, knowing you followed one of his clues without realizing it. He pulls a rag-wrapped bundle from his satchel and unwraps it to reveal a small length of iron chain, corroded but sturdy. "Found this snagged on my drill line," he says, holding it between two fingers, likely used as a mooring point or decoration along a harbor wall. You run your hand along its rusted loops, feeling the weight of water and time. The link's patina seems to pulse in the firelight, as though eager to resume its ancient duty. Iskander suggests you accompany him at dawn to the north shore, where he first found the sandstone fragments. He'll show you how to test the water's clarity and where to press for glimpses of towers just beneath the surface. You agree readily, excitement threading through exhaustion. The promise of more discoveries propels you, even as the fire dwindles to glowing coals. He gestures to an overturned stump that serves as his table. "One more thing," he says, flipping through his notebook to a marked page. He smooths it out and points to a map sketched in faded ink. A rough outline of Sailimu's shoreline. You step onto the rickety dock just as midnight strikes, lantern in hand and notebook tucked under your arm. The wooden planks creak beneath your boots, sending a shiver up your spine that has nothing to do with the night air. The lake stretches out before you like a dark mirror, barely distinguishable from the sky above until the moon breaks through a veil of clouds. You pause at the edge, breathing in the crisp scent of pine and damp wood, and listen as distant echoes drift across the water. Faint peals of metal, as if some unseen hand is ringing a bell far beneath the surface. You settle on a weathered post, tightening the scarf around your neck and resting the lantern on the dock beside you. The beam casts trembling circles of light that dance across the ripples, illuminating the slimy edges of algae where the water meets wood. You open your notebook and flip to a fresh page, uncapping your pen. With deliberate strokes, you write, "Midnight Pier Vigil. Expect echoes, ghostly chimes, faint outlines." Beneath it, you draw a quick sketch of the dock's outline, marking where you'll place offerings and set your lantern. The lake is unervingly still. You glance down its length, the far shoreline nothing more than a silhouette of peaks against the ink-black sky. A breath of wind stirs the surface, creating concentric ripples that stretch toward you and fade like footsteps vanishing in sand. Somewhere beyond the dock, frogs croak in sleepy cadence, and a loon's mournful call punctuates the hush. You shift your weight, trying not to think about how easy it would be to slip between the boards and vanish into the cold depths. Minutes pass, measured only by the steady drip of water from your lantern handle and the careful scratching of your pen on paper. You jot down observations. 0:10 distant chime faint, like metal on metal but softer. Could be current against a submerged beam. You smile at your own caution. You suspect the lake is teasing you, coaxing you into believing ordinary phenomena are supernatural. But you steady yourself. You came here to listen, record, and maybe understand what lies beneath the waves. You rise and walk to the edge of the dock, lantern held overhead. The light catches motes of mist drifting above the water, turning them into phantom fireflies. Beneath the hull of your boat, you glimpse a dark shape shifting slowly. Perhaps a log, perhaps something more deliberate. You shake your head and chuckle softly. Either a lost tree branch or a sunken column. You murmur to yourself, remembering the geologist's whispered revelations. This lake loves its little pranks. You return to your post and retrieve a small pouch of dried apricots from your pocket. Offerings for the lake spirits, as the fisherman taught you. You place 3 on the dock at the water's edge, spacing them evenly. To honor the point between the cathedral spire and the frozen flats, you note in your notebook, symbolic gifts, sweetness for the deep. You tuck the empty pouch back in your coat and uncork a small vial of aromatic sage oil, dabbing a drop on each apricot half for a fragrant flourish. The scent mixes with night air, bold and cleansing. Your lantern's flame sputters. You cup it in your hand, blowing gently to revive it. Sparks leap up, briefly illuminating the dock like a campfire. You laugh quietly at the dramatic effect. Probably not the serene vigil you imagined when the scholar suggested this exercise. But the unpredictability of the lantern feels fitting. Just like the lake's secrets, light here is precious and fleeting. You sit again, pen ready, and glance at your watch. Just past 0:30. You listen for the bell toll, that hollow resonance you first heard from the fisherman's boat. The memory of it makes your skin prickle. A single note, stretched long, then fading into silence. You brace yourself for its return, fingers poised to write down the exact pitch and duration. But for several long moments, only the hiss of water against wood fills your ears. Then there it is, a soft, deliberate toll, like a bronze bell dipped in molasses. It echoes once, twice, then dissolves. You start writing almost before the sound finishes, scratching furiously. 0:33, bell toll. Low pitch, resonance 5s, origin undetermined. The echo seems to linger beneath the surface, as though vibrating through submerged walls. You lean forward, extinguishing your own breathing to catch stray vibrations. But nothing stirs in the air save the faint rustle of reeds at the shoreline. You look up to the north where the river feeds into the lake, half expecting to catch a flicker of light or movement. A lantern bobs in the distance, perhaps another watcher, or a fisherman making a late-night check on nets. You raise a hand in greeting, but the figure vanishes behind a stand of trees. Probably just a stray villager, you tell yourself. Still, the idea that you're not completely alone offers a small comfort. You return to your offerings. Pulling a chipped pottery shard from your pocket, you place it beside the apricots. The shard's curved edge catches the lantern beam, revealing traces of cobalt glaze. You write, "Offer 4. Shard at 035. Location. Dock edge." Then you pause, listening. The lake replies with nothing more than gentle lapping. You wonder if the shard will rest on some hidden tile floor far below, echoing the placements you made on the frozen flats. Time drifts, each minute stretching longer than the last. You flip back through your notes. Echoes at the fisherman's cove, scholars' map points, geologists' fragments. Here, on this dock, they all converge. You sip from a flask of lukewarm herbal tea, careful not to spill it in the dark. The tea tastes of chamomile and a hint of mint, calming your nerves and lending focus to your vigil. Your lantern guttering again, you shake it upright. It sputters into steady glow. In its light, you spot something floating in the water. A coil of hemp rope, thicker than any you brought. You frown. That wasn't there moments ago. The rope drifts gently, tangling around submerged planks. You murmur, wondering if someone left it purposely. You shine the beam on the rope's end and see a carved wooden block attached, triangular in shape, etched with the same floral motif as the slab from the fisherman's net. Your heart thuds. This is no random debris. You grip the rope's free end and tug gently. It resists, then slides through the water toward you. You hook it under the dock's rung and pull it closer, lantern held aloft so the light bounces off the carved block. Blue-black silt peels away under your fingers, revealing swirling vines and 7-petaled flowers identical to those on the stone slab. You swallow, mind racing. Who set this rope here? A prank? Or a clue left by someone who knows the city sleeps beneath? You tie the rope to the dock's cleat and step back. "All right, Lake," you whisper. "If you want me to follow this thread, here we go." You feel a thrill of excitement mingled with unease, like unraveling a tapestry you might not be ready to see. But you jot down, "Found rope and carved block at 050, origin unknown. Possible link to sunken slabs." You shift in your seat, scanning the water for ripples that might indicate movement. For a moment, nothing stirs. Then you hear it. A faint scraping, like stone against stone, coming from directly beneath the dock. Your lantern light quivers as you stand, peering over the edge. Just below the surface, shadowed by the dock's crossbeams, you make out a straight edge, dark, angular, and very much deliberate. A wall. You catch your breath and jot, "Scrape under dock at 052, possible wall edge." You lean forward, lantern in one hand and rope in the other for balance. The water here is surprisingly clear, though flecks of silt swirl with your lantern beam. Your fingers brush against the submerged block, confirming its solidity. Then your fingertips graze the edge of a much larger stone block set into the lakebed. You trace its outline, wide, worn smooth by centuries of water, but unmistakably worked by human hands. A grid of mortar lines intersects at perfect right angles. This is the same city architecture you've glimpsed at the cove and under the ice. Thrilled, you note the coordinates in your notebook, drawing a quick sketch of the block's profile against the dock's framing. Your pen hesitates as you consider your next move. Dive in and explore, or wait for dawn and enlist help. The water seems to pulse beneath you, a silent invitation. But you force yourself to pull back, reminding yourself that equipment and planning matter. Document first, dive later. You write, underlining the phrase twice. You settle back onto the post, heart still racing. Beneath the dock, you can feel the presence of granite and silt, history and mystery converging. You draw a deep breath and let it out slowly, savoring the weight of this discovery. The lake speaks in whispers. A soft creak of wood, a gentle lap of water against stone, a distant echo that might be your own heartbeat. You glance at your watch again, 1:10. A part of you wants to stay until sunrise, but you arrive at the dock just before dawn, lantern in hand and heart beating a slow drum against your ribs. The fisherman stands in his weathered boat, holding the rope you secured last night, nodding when he sees you clutching the simple leather goggles and waxed candle stub you've brought. The air is crisp, the sky pale lavender above the lake's still surface. Behind you, the village sleeps. Ahead, the water waits. You set the lantern atop a piling so its light will guide you back. Then step into the boat, settling onto the narrow bench. Your boots scrape the wood as you ease forward, silent save for the soft creak of oarlocks and the distant cry of a gull bidding farewell to night. He pushes off with the oars, each stroke ghost quiet, until you float above that submerged wall you found yesterday. You tie one end of the safety rope to your belt and pass the other end to the fisherman, who coils it in his large, calloused hands. When you're ready, he whispers, "Give a tug." You nod, feeling the rope's rough hemp fibers brushing your hip. It's a lifeline to the world above, your anchor against the depths. You take a steadying breath, slip the leather goggles over your eyes, and feel the snug straps press against your temples. The world blurs for a moment, then sharpens. The lantern's glow rippling across the water's top, the forested shore fading into mist. You raise a small waxed candle clipped to your belt, your only source of underwater light, and wink it off with a quiet click. You stand at the boat's edge and test the water with one toe. It's colder than expected, icy enough to steal warmth, but not numbing. You step forward, shifting weight onto the balls of your feet, and then your vertical, water rising to your chest, then chin, then collarbone. The candle stub swings pendulously at your side, its wick protected by a makeshift leather case that keeps water at bay. You take one more deep breath, pressing your lips together so the air won't escape, and then you duck your head underwater. The moment the surface breaks behind you, the lake's hush deepens to an otherworldly silence. No birds call, no wind stirs, just the soft pulse of your heartbeat in your ears. The light from above fractures into dancing rays, illuminating suspended particles that shimmer like stardust. A faint current drifts across the submerged wall, brushing fine silt into tiny whirlpools that cling to your goggles and coat your fingertips. You open your eyes and peer through the glass, scanning for the archway you aim to explore. Shapes emerge through the murk. A series of stone blocks arranged in a gentle curve, held fast by moss and silt, forming the base of a grand arch once tall enough to admit riders on horseback. Now it sits half-buried, almost inviting you to swim through and discover what lies on the other side. Your lungs burn, but the city calls you forward. You kick your legs and push off the wall, propelling yourself into deeper water. Your arms sweep in slow strokes, goggles revealing the archway's sultry contours. Columns draped in algae, capitals carved with lotus petals and interlaced knots. You reach the base of the arch and anchor your candle case in the silt, wedging it between two blocks so it shines its flicker upward. Light spills across the arch's underside, revealing a vaulted chamber beyond. You gasp silently, as much from awe as lack of air. Kicking harder, you glide through the arch into a domed room where broken pillars lie scattered like fallen sentinels. The candle's flame flickers against the stone, casting wavering shadows that dance among submerged fragments of door frames and window grills. You clench your nose and blow, clearing your goggles of silt, then exhale gently to avoid stirring up more. The walls here rise like the skeleton of a grand hall, arches reaching skyward into the water until they disappear into darkness. You can't see the ceiling, only fathom its height by the way light fades into black above you. You push off the floor and drift above a sunken column, water murky with centuries of sediment. A school of small fish darts past, startled by your intrusion, their silver bodies glowing in the candlelight. You hover, letting the current shift your hair, and reach out to touch a fluted shaft just within reach. Your finger traces a carved groove, a spiral vine motif that coils around the pillar's base like a serpent guarding treasure. The stone is cool and smooth, polished by flowing water. You close your eyes and press your face against the pillar, humming a low note you hope might reverberate through the chamber. Instead, you feel only the press of water against your lungs, reminding you of your fragile time limit. You tug at the rope's slack to remind the fisherman that you're still breathing, still alive beneath the waves. The rope trembles in response. 3 minutes pass in a blur of light and shadow. Your chest burns, lungs clamor for air, and beads of moisture collect on the inside of your goggles. You glance at the candle. Its leather sheath is damp but holding fast. The flame flickers desperately, sputtering against the cold. You know you've lingered too long. Every second underwater carries risk. You spot the arch's far side. A narrow passage lined with water-smooth tiles etched in patterns matching those on the scholar's scroll. If you clear your mind of the burn in your lungs, you might glimpse how those tiles form a hidden mosaic. Summoning the last of your breath, you kick toward the passage, body horizontal, arms extended. The water hides tiny particles that brush your skin, and you feel the pull of stale air above. Yet the sight of that mosaic lures you onward. You glide just above the floor, which is carpeted in thick silt that swirls beneath your flippers. You brush your hand over the tiles, disturbing a swirl of murk. For a heartbeat, the candlelight catches on a raised pattern, a lotus encircled by a ring of geometric petals, the same watermark you saw on the scroll in the scholar's study. It's proof that this chamber was part of the city's sanctum, a place of ritual and worship now silent underwater. Your ribs ache with the need for air. You realize you've stayed too long. Dragging on your last vestige of will, you turn and kick back through the arch, racing toward the dock where the lantern's glow is a beacon urging you upward. You sight the stone blocks of the wall, then the ladder carved into the jetty's side. Your lungs groan as you push upward, arms reaching for the ladder's lowest rung. You clasp it with ice-cold fingers and pull your body out of the lake in a rash of splashing beads. You gasp for air at the surface, head bobbing like a cork, breathing deep and fast until your heart slows and lungs settle. Drenched and trembling, you lift yourself onto the dock. The fisherman lunges forward, wrapping you in a heavy coat and patting your back until your shivers quiet. The lantern above catches the sweat and water droplets on your face, turning each into a tiny star. You lean against the piling, drawing deep breaths of pine-scented air. "What did you see?" the fisherman asks, voice laced with concern and wonder. You squat beside him, digging out your notebook and a stub of charcoal tied to your belt. Fingers numb, you scrawl a rough sketch of the arch's outline. Blocks, columns, mosaic floor, candle case fastening. Each line feels shaky but true. He helps you stow the goggles and candle case in your satchel, then hands you a flask of steaming herbal tea. You sip gratefully, warmth flooding your chest. On the dock's planks, water drips in tiny splashes, each one echoing through the stillness. You lean back, knees pulled to your chest, and let the world settle. The only sound is your breathing, ragged but steady now, and the distant rustle of reeds in the morning breeze. You watch as the fish dart beneath the lantern's halo, oblivious to the centuries of history soaking your clothes. You offer the flask to the fisherman, who shakes his head with a wry smile. "Keep it," he says. "You'll need it when you're ready for your next dive." You nod, cradling the flask against your palms, and gaze at the water where the archway lies hidden. The sun's first rays are cresting the mountain line, turning the sky a rosy gold that glances off the lake's surface like molten metal. You realize the dive has revealed more than stone and silt. It's given you a glimpse of the city's inner sanctum, preserved in a forgotten chamber sealed by time and water. You rise unsteadily to your feet and begin to row the boat back toward shore. Each stroke loosens the chill in your limbs and carries you farther from the arch, yet closer to the world above. You tuck your scarf under your chin, letting the warmth chase away the damp that clings to your bones. The fisherman rows in companionable silence, guiding the boat through glassy water that reflects the morning sky in perfect symmetry. Back on solid ground, you help the fisherman haul the boat onto the pebbled beach, lantern in hand. You climb the slope toward the village, satchel banging at your side, mind racing with possibilities. The arch's vaulted chamber, its mosaic floor, the carved lotus watermark. All demand further exploration. You imagine crafting a rope stirrup to lean farther into the passage. Maybe a second candle stub for deeper light. You might build a wooden frame to dry the mosaic tiles you've loosened for study. The list of ideas spins in your head like a whirling current. You wake before the lantern's glow fades. The memory of vaulted arches and silt dust swirling in your dream. The morning sky is pale and quiet, but your mind buzzes with purpose. Today you pursue the next thread. Water-worn tablets carrying prayers from a forgotten people. You dress in layers, wool under linen. Tuck your notebook and charcoal stub into your coat pocket, and sling a satchel over your shoulder filled with cloth wrappings, a small brush, and leather gloves. You steal a moment at the window, peering at Sailimu's glassy surface, where the day's first light casts ripples like soft whispers across its face. With a steadying breath, you push open the scholar's door and step into anticipation. By dusk, you rendezvous at the pier with the fisherman and Iskander, each carrying their own lantern. The air drips with expectation and the tang of pine resin. The fisherman offers you a trimmed oar. Iskander secures a length of weighted line to his belt. The three of you set off in the skiff, oars dipping in unison, sending ripples wide enough to disturb the lake's secrets. Conversation is sparse. Each man is lost in his own collection of theories. Above, the moon sails high, its reflection fracturing into pale ribbons that guide your course to the cove where half-legend says the tablets lie buried. You step out into ankle-deep water once you reach the cove, lantern held high. The water is strangely warm here, stirred by spring currents rising from hidden springs. Beneath the lantern's halo, you see flat stones layered like pages in a book. You kneel and brush aside pebbles with gloved hands, revealing edges smoothed by centuries of current. They feel impossibly thin, like writing tablets rather than foundation stones. You call softly to your companions. The fisherman shines his lantern on the exposed surface, where faint lines of chiseling catch the light. You slip on your goggles and ease beneath the surface, fingertips trailing over submerged shelves of stone. The first tablet lies half buried in silty sand, its top edge aligned with the lakebed like a submerged altar. You grip it with one hand and press a downward tug. It resists, then yields with a muffled pop as water floods the gap. You surface, chest heaving, and cradle the tablet in both arms. It's heavier than you expect, cold, smooth, and etched with fine lines that form a grid of characters. Back in the boat, you place the tablet on a cloth cushion. Lantern light reveals the tablet's surfaces. Gently rounded corners, edges worn by water, but the incised script remains crisp in places. You lift the lantern close and trace the characters with a finger. They loop and spiral in a language you don't recognize, but the scholar's mark for water appears again. A wavy line beneath a crescent moon. You jot this in your notebook and press the cloth against the stone to blot away silt. The tablet's words feel urgent, as though they beckon you to remember their meaning. Undeterred, you dive again. Iskander steadies the boat as you reach for a second tablet nestled in a crevice between larger blocks. This one is smaller, a paddle-shaped piece bearing depictions of rippling waves and a column crowned by a lotus. When you pry it free, water pours through your fingers like liquid silver. You surface, shivering in the night air, and marvel at the engraving. Tiny dots pitting the stone, forming a chorus of symbols that look like stars scattered over a map. The third tablet hangs near the shoreline, partially covered by strands of lake weed. You lie prone at the boat's edge, leaning forward until your fingers brush the mossy stone. It's slippery, and you almost lose your grip, but you manage to ease it free. This third piece feels different, warmer, as though recently moved by another pair of hands. Its face is scored with deep grooves, remnants of pigment that once filled the carvings with color. You sense layers of meaning here, waiting for translation. Once you have all three, you return to the village for the night's campfire by the scholar's workshop. The fisherman lights a bundle of pine boughs, smoke rising in curling tendrils that scent the air with resin and memory. You spread a wool blanket on the ground and lay the tablets on it, each on its own cloth square. Sparks from the fire drift around like tiny dragonflies, the hush of night broken by cicadas, and the scholar's low murmur of anticipation. You carefully unwrap each tablet, using the soft brush to clear away grains of sand lodged in crevices. Every sweep of bristles reveals more of the inscriptions. Rows of characters that arch like waves, punctuated by symbols for moon, star, and column. You handle the stones gingerly, marveling at how the chisels bit into rock so many lifetimes ago. Every cut a prayer carved under torchlight. The tablets feel alive in your hands, humming with the weight of rituals performed long before the lake swallowed the city. Holding the first tablet upright, you angle it toward the firelight and study the lines. The inscriptions read in neat rows. Invocations of Water Mother, Keeper of Deep Gates, and Bearer of Silent Bells. You murmur the words, sounding them out like an incantation. The speaker's voice echoes first in your skull, then in the night air, carried across the lake in a soft vibration. You shiver, certain that the water's surface quivers in response, though the fisherman swears he hears only your voice. The second tablet's glyphs are more pictographic. Fish, reeds, and lotus buds punctuated by tiny stars. You trace a line beneath each row, noting the repetition of certain clusters, likely refrains in a chant. You repeat them slowly. Soothe our passage, guard our memories, sing the city awake. Each phrase feels like a tender plea, a prayer for remembrance cast into liquid darkness. You imagine monks kneeling on hidden steps, candlelight flickering as they intone these lines to deities of stone and water. When you lift the third tablet, your breath catches. The grooves are deeper, the script more urgent. You read fragments, offer sweet fruit, toll the bells, carry the city's heart. The last line is incomplete, letters chipped away by time. You hold your palm over the missing section, imagining the unspoken words. A final invocation lost to silt and silence. A cold breeze gusts across the firelight, and you glance up, half expecting floating lanterns to answer the tablet's pleas. Instead, the lake lies dark and still. The scholar arrives then, drawn by the flicker of firelight and murmur of readings. He kneels beside you, peering through magnifying lenses at each tablet. His fingertips hover above the carved lines as if afraid to touch their sacred surfaces. These are true relics, he whispers, voice reverent. Phrases meant to keep the city alive in memory. Their prayers for safe passage through the deep and to honor the spirits who built these halls. He traces a finger along the second's rows of pictograms. This one is a hymn, an underwater litany. You copy his translation into your notebook. Water Mother, grant passage. Silent Bell, toll for us. City of Stone, remember us. You recite the lines aloud, slow and steady. The repeated cadence lulls you, each syllable a droplet in a hidden stream. You feel the lake's pulse sync with your own, an ancient heartbeat stirring beneath the surface. Goosebumps rise on your arms as if the city itself shivers in recognition. Encouraged, you stand and raise the first tablet over your head. Together, you say, "We call your name." You chant the invocation in its entirety, voice echoing in the night. The fisherman and Iskander join your soft refrain, their tones blending with yours in a gentle chorus. The fire's glow flickers and dims, as though paying respect to the city's prayers. A distant tolling drifts across the lake, metallic, mournful, unmistakable. You falter mid-chant, breath catching. But then you continue, heart pounding with the strange, beautiful music of ancient words. The bell tolls again, and beneath your feet you feel a subtle vibration through the earth and water. You close your eyes, letting the chant carry you away, carried by currents both physical and spectral. When you finally lower the tablets, the echo lingers, and the lake's surface shimmers like cracked glass. You sense that your offering has been received, that the city's prayers have found an audience. The scholar translates the final fragments by firelight. He traces symbols you missed. A pair of hands raised in supplication, a lotus blossoming in moonlight. These are blessings, he says, voice soft. For the city's people living and dead. You nod, chest tight with awe. The tablets, once silent stone, have spoken through you, carrying their voices across centuries. You wrap each tablet back in its cloth, careful to preserve the inscriptions. The fisherman gathers them, placing them in a leather case tied with waxed cord. "We'll keep these safe," he says reverently, "and return them at the heart of the city's plaza." You trace the circle you and the scholar drew on your map, where the 4 ritual sites converge. There, in open water, you slip quietly from the pier just after dusk, lantern in one hand and a handful of juniper sprigs in the other, their sharp fragrance mingling with mist rising from Sailimu's surface. The village behind you is hushed, lit by scattered lanterns swinging in wooden frames. Ahead, the largest yurt glows warmly on the shore, its felt walls pressurized by hearth fires within. You wade through the shallow edge, water swirling around your ankles, and step onto smooth stones that lead to the open doorway. Inside, heat and smoke from burning juniper twigs envelop you, and the low murmur of gathered tribespeople greets your arrival. A ring of benches surrounds a central hearth, where embers glow beneath a bed of coals. Men, women, and elders alike sit wrapped in faded wool cloaks patterned with tribal motifs, fish scales and crescent moons. Children nestle at the back, faces lit by the soft flicker of a single brass lamp. You cross the woven mat, eyes downcast in respect, and take your place beside the fisherman and the geologist who have guided you this far. Their silent nods assure you that this ceremony is as ancient as the lake itself. At the honored end of the circle sits Terrigen Hyran, the tribe's storyteller and ritual keeper. His weathered features reflect firelight, and his deep-set eyes seem to hold every story ever told beneath sail and star. He wears a heavy belt of carved leather and a cloak bound with silver clasps shaped like fish. When he rises, the room falls utterly silent, as though the yurt itself leans in to listen. Terrigen's first gesture is a simple one. He lifts a shallow wooden chalice filled with water from the sacred spring nestled high in the mountains above the lake. The tribespeople watch as he inches the chalice toward his lips and sips, closing his eyes against the cold sweetness. You feel the hush in the yurt deepen, and when he speaks, his voice is low but carries to every corner of the circle. He recounts the origin of the oath. How, in an age before written records, the ancestors forged a bond with Sailimu's waters. They pledged to honor the city that once thrived on its shores, to protect its memory when the lake rose and claimed its streets. He describes how drought drove them to the spring, how famine drove them to the harvest fields, and how flood drove them to the water's edge where they watched towers sink beneath the waves. Each hardship and each offering bound them ever more tightly to the lake's spirit. You listen, heart stirring, as Terrigen's tale weaves past and present into a single thread. Around you, the tribe murmurs in a tongue older than any scroll, voices rising in echoes of names long forgotten. You focus on his words, each syllable anchoring you deeper into this moment, knowing you stand not as an observer but as a participant in a ritual that has sustained a people for centuries. Terrigen steps forward to a driftwood altar at the fire's edge. For objects lie upon it: a tuft of horsehair, braid of marsh reeds, a pouch of dried barley, and a small bronze ring etched with the fish and lotus motif you've seen on submerged tiles. He picks up the horsehair first, running fingers through its white strands. He explains that in days gone by, a white stallion's blood was poured into that same spring when rain failed to soften the fields, an offering of life for life. He places the tuft into a bowl of spring water and lets droplets fall into the dying embers. The coals flare, releasing a sharp, iron-scented smoke that curls into the yurt's rafters. With a measured breath, Terrigen lifts the braided reeds and hums a soft lament. He speaks of how the reeds once guided boats laden with grain to the city's docks, how their rustling leaves bore messages to priests in temple towers. He snaps the braid in two and lays fluffed reeds across the altar like a nest awaiting an offering. The tribe watches the soft rustle of fibers as though the reeds themselves still whisper in ceremony. Next, he takes the pouch of barley, grain grown on the terraces around the village, sun-dried and salted by wind, and scatters a handful into the fire. Tiny pops ring through the yurt as grains crack and pop, sending sparks upward. He tells of harvests once shared with lakefolk whose dwellings now lie beneath silt and water. Barley stood for sustenance, he says, so no bellies in sky or deep would go empty. Finally, Terrigen holds the bronze ring aloft, its surface scored by age but still gleaming in lamplight. He speaks of how each ring was once cast beneath the city's bell towers, marking the anniversaries of founding days. When the waters rose, the people cast their rings into the lake's heart, so that even submerged, the bells would toll in memory. He lowers the ring and places it carefully on the driftwood, completing the quartet of offerings. You feel the weight of his gaze as it passes to you. He gestures for you to stand and join him at the altar. You step forward, heart thudding, and place your lantern on the ground, so its flicker will not distract from the ritual. Terrigen hands you a shallow dish of spring water. He indicates you should taste it as he did, to become part of the covenant. You lean down, sipping the water and letting cold clarity fill you. The juniper sprigs in your pocket whisper their piney promise. Terrigen then gives you a small coil of red cord. He murmurs that every member of the tribe carries a thread of memory, blood, straw, and grain woven into a promise that the city's story will never fade. He motions for you to knot a sprig of juniper to the cord, binding your own thread to theirs. Your fingers, still damp from water, fumble as you tie the juniper's base in 3 careful loops. The smell of pine and resin rises in a small cloud, and you hold the coil like a talisman. He invites you to place your hand atop the driftwood altar, where the 4 offerings lie still warm. You press your palm flat and feel a pulse beneath the wood, as though the lake's own heartbeat responds to the contact. Terrigen recites blessings in the old tongue, words you cannot fully decode, but whose cadence resonates deep in your chest. The community around you bows heads and clasps hands, their collective breath rising and falling like waves. Following his invocation, Terrigen lifts the brass ring again and leads you outside, lantern and talisman swinging gently. You step onto the cool stones and wade into the water until it laps at your knees. The lake mirrors the yurt's light, bobbing reflections that seem almost alive. Terrigen wades at your side, carrying the water bowl. He pauses where an old stone threshold lies just beneath the surface, a spot you recognized from the scholar's map as the Eastern Harbor Gate. There, he instructs you to hold the red-corded juniper at the wall's edge. You lean forward, water swirling around your waist, and brush the tip of the sprig against the lichen-clad stone. Terrigen pours a dribble of spring water from the bowl onto the juniper, then lets it spill onto the submerged threshold. The smell of juniper and spring mixes with the lake's cold breath, sending a shiver through your spine. You close your eyes and let your thoughts drift through corridors of water and stone, imagining ghosts of the city's builders feeling the fresh scent of pine. Beneath the surface, you picture moss-covered columns and arches responding to your offering, as though roused from their silted slumber. The water feels charged, as though your promise alone has stirred unseen currents. Terrigen stands beside you and places his hand on yours. Together you hold the juniper against the stone for a long heartbeat, long enough to feel the pull of generations united under oath. Then he withdraws, and you place the juniper on the stone, its needle-tipped sprig floating away on a gentle eddy. You watch it drift until it disappears into darkness. He leads you back to the shore, where the third and final act awaits. A small crowd has gathered, elders who have lost family homes to the waves, children born under the city's unspoken shadow, villagers who fish and farm its rims. Each holds a personal token, a handful of barley, a broken reed braid, even tiny bells cast in copper. They line the water's edge, forming a silent line of kinship. At Terrigen's signal, they step forward one by one, offering their tokens to the water. You watch as barley drifts beneath the surface, reeds unfurling in currents, bells sinking with a hollow ring. Each ritual act seals another link to the submerged city. The water accepts each gift, ripples fanning outward, carrying memory back beneath the waves. When the last bell has sounded, Terrigen lifts his staff and declares the oath renewed. His voice rings clear in the night air, cutting through mist and memory. He speaks of hope, of renewal, of the duty each person bears to remember and to protect. There is no chant or verse, only his steady words and the hush that follows, like an exhale felt by every soul present. As the crowd disperses, You remain by the water's edge for a moment, kneeling to collect a handful of the mud that coats the submerged stones. You cup it in your palms, feeling the grit and weight of centuries. You recite your own silent vow, to carry this earth with you, to tell its stories wherever you roam. You return to the yurt, where steam rises from communal bowls of tea flavored with juniper berries. You wake to the hush of early morning, the world still wrapped in the lake's quiet breath. Your eyes open to lantern light dancing on the walls, soft and golden, and you lie still a moment longer, gathering your thoughts. Last night's ceremony and tales have settled into your bones, and today you take up the gentlest of calls, to listen for the city's whisper through tattered pages rescued from its own depths. You dress by lantern glow, pulling on a soft shirt and woolen vest, then slip leather gloves over your hands. In your satchel you carry the fragile remnants, water-stained sheets trimmed from a merchant's ledger, a scholar's note on hidden fountains, sketches of cobblestone paths, each rescued from the lake's secret pulse. No longer mere scraps of parchment, these fragments have become your guides, threads of a story you will weave into a single tapestry. Crossing the cottage threshold, you inhale the scent of wood smoke and fresh tea. The scholar sits at the table, spectacles low on his nose, arranging the dried fragments on soft cloths. He offers you a steaming cup, gentle mint and chamomile, whose warmth travels down your throat. You cradle it for a moment, letting its calm settle your mind, then set it aside and slide onto a stool beside him. Together you uncover the first sheet, edges curling like petals. The ink is pale, blurred by the lake's embrace, but you are not here to read names or dates. You are here to feel the echoes. You press your fingertips lightly on the parchment and close your eyes. You imagine morning light filtering through high windows onto smooth cobblestones, lanterns swaying in frames above market stalls, merchants arranging cloth bolts and clay jars. You sense the rhythms of footsteps, soft leather soles on stone, and the hum of quiet conversation beneath vaulted arches. Beside you, the scholar nods, eyes alight with understanding. He gently turns the parchment, revealing a margin sketch of a row of shops, their roofs slanted at perfect angles. You trace the lines with your finger and whisper to yourself, here was the heart of trade. You picture children darting between stalls, baskets of fruit and silk filling woven trays, the air bright with morning promise. Soft candlelight flickers on the next fragment, smaller and more fragile, perhaps once protected in a wooden box. You lift it gingerly, letting its weight rest in your palm. A faint pattern of lines suggests the outline of cobbles sloping toward a hidden courtyard. You imagine a traveler's boots clicking on those stones, following secret passages behind closed shutters. Perhaps a priest carried incense here beneath pillars carved with lotus buds. You imagine that soft chant, rising and falling like the lake's own breath. The scholar uncorks a small vial of spring water from the mountains. He dampens a fine brush and hands it to you. Without haste, you sweep away stubborn granules of dust, revealing more of the lines and loops. The brush bristles whisper against parchment, and you feel the weight of centuries lift for a moment, the story spilling into the lamp's glow. A hush settles over the room as you lift the third piece, a fragment scored with carefully drawn gutters and channels. You set it against your palm and tilt it into the light, watching shadows play across its surface. You feel for the history etched there, how water once ran through those channels, guiding ritual offerings from fountain to courtyard. You imagine priests standing in stone-lined alcoves, offering sweet pastries for safe passage across the lake's tides. You think of the villagers at dawn, pouring water from the spring into bronze bowls, and you sense a web of ritual linking land and water, past and present. You reach for the scholar's journal and sketch a simple grid in charcoal. One square for each fragment scene, marked with symbols, a small lantern for market, a lotus bud for courtyard, a channel for fountain. Beneath each, you jot a few words, stone streets, hidden chapel, water channel, as memory anchors them. The scholar glances at your map, adding a compass rose and notes in his tidy hand. Align these with shoreline features at sunrise. You nod, realizing that dawn's light will guide your first dive against these same markers. Outside, a night heron wheels overhead, its cry soft against the dark. You pause, letting its single note carry across open water in your mind, then return to the final fragment. Small, nearly translucent in places. You lift it carefully and hold it up to the lamp. You see two straight lines, parallel and true, curving gently around what must have been a plaza's edge. You imagine stepping from cobbles into open air, where banners once fluttered, and gazing across reflective pools that mirrored stone and sky. You sense the hush of anticipation that must have filled that space each dawn. The scholar offers you a bit of flatbread and fruit, which you accept gratefully. You taste the sweetness of plum and grain, grounding yourself in the moment even as your mind drifts through submerged memories. Together you compare maps, overlaying sketches with shoreline landmarks. A jutting rock, a cluster of reeds, a low embankment where ice once formed. You and the scholar chart a course in charcoal, northward beneath the oak pier, eastward past the frozen flats, to checkpoints where those stone streets lie in wait. The fisherman appears at the door, bundled for the cold air. He folds his lantern into your hands and nods toward the pier. "The water is calm," he says. "Second light, we follow these marks." You tuck the fragments into a waterproof case, each nested in soft cloth, and strap it across your back. You gather your rope and goggles, letting anticipation tighten in your chest like a small drum. By the time you reach the jetty, first light is brushing the horizon in pale rose. Lantern beams flicker on gently lapping waves, and you step into the skiff with a calm thrill. The scholar boards beside you, oars in hand, and the fisherman pushes off. You settle into the bow, case at your feet, as the boat glides over water as smooth as glass. When you come to the first marker, a sun-bleached stone you recognized from the merchant's sketch, you stop rowing. You tie the rope through your belt and slip into the water, cool and clear against your calves. You pause to let your eyes adjust, then raise your lantern under the surface. Pale light spills across moss-covered cobbles, exact replicas of the lines you traced in your map. You kneel and let your fingers trace the stones, their edges worn but still true. You rise, heart humming, and follow the rowboat's gentle drift to the next point. There, hidden beneath a thin layer of silt, lie the remains of a fountain channel sketched on the second fragment. Water pearls on carved stone, glinting like tiny stars in your lantern's glow. You kneel and prod the channel with a gloved hand, feeling the soft give of centuries of sediment. You lift away a small pile of muck to reveal the curve of the stone lip, exactly as you imagined it. Each discovery deepens the story you tell yourself. Footsteps echoing, offerings carried, life flowing through stone veins. At the third marker, a slight rise in the lake bed, you find a broken tile bearing the lotus bud you saw on the courtyard fragment. You brush it free of silt and hold it aloft, lantern light flickering across its surface. You imagine priests gathering here, chanting in gentle unison beneath carved arches, lanterns swinging like bells in the night. These gentle revelations fill you with awe and comfort, as though you've stepped into a living dream spun by the fragments themselves. You wade back to the boat, dripping with cold water and wonder, and climb aboard. The scholar hands you a silk cloth to wipe your goggles, and the fisherman offers a nod of approval. No words are needed. Your triumph is shared in the hush of dawn. At the final marker, the plaza's edge, you lower the case of fragments to the boat's floor and slip into the current one last time. You drift to the cobblestone edge where the two parallel lines curve out of sight. Lantern submerged, you shine it along the seam where two stones meet, revealing the ghost of a street. Precise paving stones that once guided festival crowds beneath lantern light. You press a finger to the place where the fragment sketch matched reality, feeling an electric spark of connection. You rise again, breath catching as you let your lantern's light scatter across water and stone. Then you wade back and climb onto the skiff. The lake looks whole again, its surface undisturbed save for ripples from the morning breeze. You sit, lantern in lap, and trace your palms over the fragments safe in their case. Each holds a secret revealed. Each brightens the story you will carry forward. The boat turns toward shore, oars drifting in the scholar's steady hands. You face east, where sunlight paints the sky in apricot and gold. The fisherman guides you in, landing the skiff on familiar pebbles. You step onto solid ground and breathe deeply of pine and water, feeling gratitude in every cell. Back at the cottage, you lay out each fragment on soft linen to dry, then remove your gloves. You pour fresh tea into a carved cup and cradle it, warmth blooming in your chest. The scholar studies your map, now annotated with each discovery, and you rise before first light, the hush of morning wrapping you in a soft promise. After days of deep dives and whispered rituals, today you seek something gentler. Ruined pillars rising from shallow reefs just beyond the oak pier. You pull on your linen shirt and wool vest, knot your scarf against the cool breeze, and secure the waterproof case of fragments at your side. Your boots already feel damp from earlier dew, and you welcome the cold as a reminder of the lake's gentle power. Outside, the fisherman waits beside his skiff, lantern in hand and oars ready. He greets you with a curt nod, his eyes reflecting the shore's pale glow. You step into the boat, settling onto the bench where your boots rest against worn wood. The oars dip into mirror-smooth water, each stroke carrying you farther from the village and into the lake's silent embrace. The world beyond fades. All that remains is the hush of water sliding past the hull and your breath rising in soft clouds. As you near the reef, the water shallows, changing from inky black to muted aquamarine. Below the surface, pale stones and sand gleam, inviting you to wade ashore. You knot the rope around your waist, and anchor to the boat and to the shore, and slip off your boots. The water laps at your ankles, and you step onto smooth pebbles that shift underfoot like a slow dance. Each step carries you deeper until the water reaches your calves, then knees, gentle enough to welcome exploration rather than challenge. All around, the reef stones rise in irregular pillars, some barely protruding above the surface, others standing chest-high against your side. You reach out, fingertips grazing rough stone warmed by dawn's first rays. You pause to let your senses settle. The scent of algae and cold stone, the soft murmur of lapping water against submerged surfaces, and the distant call of a lone heron probing for fish. It feels as though the lake itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to rediscover what slumbers here. You kneel beside the first pillar, water shimmering beneath your lantern's glow. Moss and lichen clothe its base in dusky greens, and barnacles cling like tiny sentinels to its fluted shaft. You trace a finger along a carved groove, an ancient lotus motif, petals curling with deliberate grace. The stone is cold and smooth where the design repeats, worn away in places by centuries of water brushing past. You close your eyes and imagine temple builders shaping this column above water, chiseling each petal until it caught the sun. Now it stands, half-drowned, a silent testament to skill and devotion. Standing slowly, you drift between pillars arranged like spectral rows. You count 7 in all, each space to form a pathway leading to a larger platform deeper in the reef. The pillars lean slightly, as if bowing under the weight of time, yet their lines remain true. You follow the row to its end, wading through water that ripples around your waist, and find yourself before a rectangular plinth, a sunken altar where offerings were once placed. You kneel, lantern held high, and shine its light over the flat top, revealing shallow carvings, circles intersecting lines, perhaps a map of lotus ponds or a schematic of the city's waterways. You cup the lantern in one hand and brush away silt with your other, uncovering more of the pattern. The surface is uneven, pitted where water has eaten stone, yet the design endures. You imagine villagers gathering here in soft procession, carrying baskets of fruit or small bells to toll in prayer. You lean close, your breath fogging the lantern glass, and whisper a vow to remember these pillars and their makers. Your gaze drifts to the next pillar, slightly offset, its capital carved as a stylized fish, tail fin arched over a wave. You wade toward it, careful not to dislodge loose rocks. Beneath the water, small fish dart among your legs, silver scales flashing. You crouch and reach down, lifting a fragment of tile from the silt. A piece of glazed pottery, its blue rim still bright against the dull stone. You tuck it into your pocket, a token to share later with the scholar, a promise that every find here has a place in the city's unfolding tale. Between pillars, you notice narrow channels where water once flowed in ritual circulations, tiny aqueducts carved of stone, now half buried but still traceable. You follow one channel toward the shore, where a line of worn stones leads back to the shallow flats you crossed earlier. The channel's floor is smooth under your palm, polished by water and offerings over ages. You set your lantern down and let the current carry your fingers, mapping ancient corsuaries. You imagine priests guiding bowls of oil or incense smoke along these channels, each scent a prayer rising through stone. You rise and gather your purchase. A cluster of barnacles clinging to a fragment of column, a tile shard chipped into a lotus petal, and the carved plinth carving liberated from silt. You tuck each into a cloth wrap, bundling them carefully in your satchel. The fisherman stands nearby, lantern raised high, ready to pull you back to the boat when you signal. You give a gentle tug on the rope and he maneuvers the skiff until its bow meets your current position. Stepping back aboard, you slip into a seat and let him row slowly along the reef's fringe. You point to the next cluster of pillars, 4 squat columns marking what you realize must have been a ceremonial walkway. Their capitals are simple squares, each carved with a faint cross pattern, perhaps marking points of ritual significance. In the water between them you glimpse more tile fragments, bright specks against dull stone. You lean over the gunwale, lantern shining across the shallow bed, and scoop one piece into your hand, a pottery shard painted with red and ochre bands. You return each column's gaze, offering a silent acknowledgement like a nod to old friends. You imagine the space alive with candles and lanterns, voices echoing in hollows beneath vaulted ceilings now lost to water. You think of the merchants' festival, the scholars mapping the city, and the tribal ceremony that bound hearts to these stones. Each pillar stands at the crossroads of many stories, and now they bear one more, yours. By the time you reach the final grouping, the sun has crested pale hills, turning the lake's surface to a field of silver. You tie the skiff to a battered piling and wade to the final set of pillars, water dancing around your waist. These rise in a semicircle, suggesting the entrance to a small temple. Their capitals are carved with a ring of lotus petals, each petal worn smooth at the edges. You crouch and let your palm settle on the shallow pool at the circle's center, where water collects in a natural basin worn into the rock. You dip your fingertips into the cool liquid and taste it, pure, mineral-laced, a reminder of mountain springs feeding these stones. Your gaze lifts to the pillar's rim, and you imagine a wooden door once set here, beyond which lay a chamber of silent worship. You imagine candlelight dancing across gilded walls, incense smoke drifting upward, and silent figures kneeling in prayer. Now the door's absence invites you to step forward, but the water runs too deep. You pause, lantern held above your head, and offer a final homage, 3 gentle taps on one pillar's base, an echo answering the merchant's bell tolls beneath the moonlit cathedral. You whisper a blessing into the chill air. May these stones know their stories yet. You slide back into the boat, your legs tingling from the cold, and settle among your bundles of finds. The fisherman rows toward shore, oars dipping in a steady rhythm that soothes your tired limbs. Overhead, gulls wheel and cry in morning light, and the lake sighs against the boat's hull. You trace your gloved fingers across the bundles, barnacles, tile shards, etched stones, and feel the thrill of new discoveries woven into the city's tapestry. Back at the landing, you step onto familiar pebbles and shake out water from your clothes. The scholar meets you at the shore, hands eager to examine each find. You unwrap the bundles one by one, laying them out on a cloth at the water's edge. You leave the scholar's cottage before dawn, the air crisp and scented with pine resin. The lake behind you glitters under a sky still tinged with night, but your path leads inland now, toward rolling meadows where a shepherd keeps silent watch over flocks and secrets alike. Each step carries you farther from the village's lantern glow and deeper into mist-cloaked fields where dew drips from tall grasses like tiny prisms. After a half-hour's walk, you crest a gentle rise and spot his camp beside a lone juniper tree. A small fire flickers in a ring of stones, its smoke twisting up into the pale morning. Near the flames stands a low yurt of woven reeds, its entrance curtained by a wool blanket patterned in tribal motifs. A flock of sheep grazes in a meadow beyond, their woolly backs blotting the grass in mottled white patches. You pause at the edge of the clearing and watch as a she-dog pads back and forth, her nose to the ground, ears twitching at invisible sounds. A tall figure emerges from the yurt's shadow, an older man with wind-burned skin and silver streaks in his beard. He wears layered wool and leather, and a carved wooden staff leans against his shoulder. His eyes, dark and reflective, meet yours without surprise. You step forward, boots silent on damp earth, and offer a respectful nod. He inclines his head in return, gesturing for you to join him by the fire. You cross the clearing, the hush of dawn broken only by the soft jingle of sheep bells and the crackle of embers. The shepherd's yurt door snaps closed behind you, leaving the fire's glow as your only warmth. You settle on a log beside him, sheet wool blanket draped across your knees, and feel the day's chill ebb in the hearth's embrace. He speaks first, his voice low as though reading the wind's tidal secrets. You've seen the city's stones, he says, but the lake watches you still. You shift, drawing the blanket tighter, and meet his gaze. I've learned much, you reply, but I still have questions. He nods, eyes flicking to the fire's embers, then back to you. Here, he begins, the flocks graze where water once lapped. My sheep know paths older than memory. They circle certain stones and avoid others altogether. They never stray beyond the line of submerged walls. You lean closer, intrigued by the quiet conviction in his tone. Last week, he continues, a lamb wandered too far and fell at the brink of the old bell tower's base. When I lifted her from the water, her fleece was wet only to her chest. Beneath that, her wool was as dry as desert sand. Yet she trembled as though water had flowed through her bones. He pauses, ember sparks drifting like tiny fireflies. I returned her to the meadow and she recovered, but she never grazed there again. You swallow, picturing the lamb's damp fleece glistening in moonlight. There is something in the water, you say, that touches more than stone. He nods, lighting a smudged stick of juniper and letting its smoke spiral upward. Smoke for guidance, he explains. Smoke to see phantoms where water runs deep. You inhale the sharp scent and let it settle in your lungs. He sets the smudge down and picks up his staff, fingers tracing carved notches. I keep this by my side for more than walking, he says. It wards off storms and restless spirits. When the wind changes without warning, when fog rises thick at noon, I plant this staff at the shore and speak a silent prayer to the lake's heart. You nod, imagining the staff's slender silhouette bowing in the breeze. Come, he says, standing. He lifts the blanket from your knees and steps outside without it. You follow, boots sinking into soft earth. The sheep huddle at the yurt's edge, watching with calm eyes. The lake lies beyond them, glassy and unbroken as far as you can see. The juniper smoke still curls from where he laid it, and you feel its guiding presence as you wade through low grasses. He leads you to a shallow inlet where ancient stones protrude like ribs from the earth. Water pools between them, clear as crystal. He kneels and dips his staff's tip into the pool, then whispers a phrase you cannot understand. The water's surface ripples, though no breeze stirs, and you lean forward to watch the reflection of your own lantern glow. For a heartbeat, the stones beneath shine with a silvery light, then settle back into silent gray. He rises and turns to you. These waters remember, he says. They carry sorrow and joy in equal measure. Disturb them carelessly, and the city's ghosts wake. You stand beside him, mind racing. What do they do? You ask. He inclines his head toward the sheep. They huddle at the shore when the ghosts stir, he explains. Flocks that once grazed calmly now stiffen, ears flicking at distant bells. They may bolt, run toward land or plunge in deep, seeking escape or guidance. Only I know their signs. You glance at the sheep behind you. A few stand still, heads turned toward the water, coats damp where reeds drip. One lifts a hoof without urging, as if feeling currents beyond sight. You swallow. I've glimpsed pillars and tablets, you say, but I never thought of ghosts. He presses fingertips to your shoulder. The city sleeps in the deep, he murmurs, but it dreams in echoes. You follow its dreams in stone. I follow them in wind and flock. He beckons you to follow him along the water's edge. You You slip off your boots again and wade into the inlet, water rippling around your knees. He sets the juniper smudge on a flat stone and kneels, facing the lake. You kneel too, close enough to feel his staff's carved notches against your hip. The haze of dawn softens the world, and you lean forward, listening for more than the lapping water. After a moment, the shepherd speaks again, voice soft as wind through reeds. There are places where the lake will trick your senses, he warns. Mirages of stone where none stands, voices carried on currents that vanish when you turn. Those are warnings, markers where the city claims no trespass. He dips a twig into the smudge's smoke and draws a spiral pattern on weathered stone, then presses it to the air. The smoke holds for an instant, forming a faint shape, then dissipates. These marks, he says, are in no scroll or map. They live only in memory and mist. You trace your fingertip through the spiral drawn in smoke, watching it vanish on your skin. How do I learn them? You ask. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply, then exhales with a hiss. By listening, he says. By watching where breezes die, where waters hold still. By seeing where no fish swim, no reeds bend. The lake's rules are silent, but they speak to those who watch closely. He stands and beckons you farther along the shore. You follow, water swirling around your calves, until you reach a narrow, rocky ledge. There, half submerged and slick with algae, lies a flat stone carved with two concentric circles. Its edges are worn, but the circles remain clear. He kneels and cups his hands, splashing water onto the stone's face. Instantly, the circles glow pale where wet, and you gasp at how precisely carved they are. The circle of return, he says, where those who disturbed the city's edge were cast back. You kneel beside him, shining your lantern under the water to reveal the outer ring's grooves. They form a symbol you've seen traced on shards and scrolls, the emblem of a sect bound to the lake spirit. If you set foot here without offering, he continues, you will know the city's wrath. Currents will swell, winds will rise, and you will be turned home by forces unseen. Your heart pounds at the weight of his words. I have offered. You remind him softly, apricots, threads, barley, your own vow. He nods, placing a hand on your shoulder. Your offerings hold, he says, but every step must be conscious. Walk with respect, or the lake's guard will meet you. He stands, tucking the staff under one arm. Come, he says. I will show you the final warning. You rise, water dripping from your boots as you follow him around a rocky point. Beyond it, a shallow pool rests between two low stones. As you approach, the pool's surface ripples without wind, as though something moved beneath. He kneels and dips his staff tip into the pool. Instantly, the water darkens around it, forming a swirling vortex. You step back on instinct, heart racing. The eye of the depths, he says, voice hushed. This is where the city's watchers stand, spirits that guard the old walls. Touch here, and you risk vanishing into the deep, called home before your story begins. You shake your head, breath catching. I won't touch it, you promise? He nods and places his hand on the staff, guiding it upward until the water calms. He turns to you, eyes grave. Remember this place, he says. The others may draw you in pillars, spires, tablets, scrolls. But here, keep your distance. Let your offering. You wake to a hush so complete it feels as though the world has paused to hold its breath. Through your window, a pale light seeps in. No sun yet, only the soft glow of dawn pressing against the night. You rise, careful not to disturb the hound curled by your door, and dress in whisper-quiet clothes. Linen shirt, wool trousers, a sturdy vest, and the shepherd's staff resting against your doorframe. The air beyond your room is damp and cool, carrying the faint scent of juniper and meadow grass. Tonight's discoveries lie behind you. Today, you will follow the mist into ruins half hidden by morning's arms. Stepping outside, you pause on the wooden porch to let the cold brush your face. The lanterns lining the lane flicker dimly, their light swallowed by a rolling bank of fog that drifts in from the lake. You draw your cloak tight and set out, boots soft on dew-soaked boards. The village slumbers still, Shutters remain closed, and the only sound is the distant drip of water from thatched eaves. You make your way toward the shore, each step unhurried, as though waking slowly alongside the land itself. When you reach the pier, the fog swirls like gauzy curtains around the wooden posts. The boat waits, stable, silent, its oars stowed with care. You untie it with one hand and push free, settling into the bench as your breath puffs in pale clouds. The fisherman stands at the bow, lantern high, guiding the boat through water so still it mirrors the fog above. You let the oars rest for a moment, drifting, and watch your own lantern light stretch into the haze in a single trembling line. Beyond the pier, the lake is an expanse of white and gray, featureless until you spot shapes rising just beneath the surface. Dark forms that flicker in the fog like ghosts testing their chains. The fisherman nudges the oars into the water, and you glide forward, following a corridor of subtle ripples. Each stroke sends concentric waves outward, momentarily painting circles of clarity on the mist-shrouded glass. You lean forward, peering into those circles, half expecting to glimpse pillars or rooftops, but only smooth water greets your gaze. You settle into the rhythm of the oars, lantern held low so its glow will not shatter the dawn's hush. The mist parts in slow, decisive sweeps, revealing the first hints of ruin. A low wall, marble white where water has washed away centuries of moss, cracked and leaning as though burdened by time. You feel your pulse ease, as though the city itself greets you with a gentle nod. You whisper, "Good morning," and the ripples lap against the hull like a shy reply. The fisherman rows until you're over that wall, then props the oars and gestures toward a shallow shoal where stone blocks peek from the mist. You step over the boat side and into water that rises no higher than your calves. The cold is a soft shock, waking every nerve. You follow the line of blocks, each one smooth where water has polished it, edged where silt has worn it thin. You reach down and press your palm against one block's flat top, an altar or platform once walked by thousands. You imagine lantern beams dancing across these stones in ages past, and you bow your head in quiet greeting. Beyond the altar, the water deepens slightly, cliffs of submerged architecture hidden by fog. You retrieve a length of rope from your satchel and let it coil free in the water until the end drifts out of sight. It tangles around a slender column, and you give it a gentle tug. The column holds firm, carved with 5-petaled rosettes worn almost flat. You lean over and shine your lantern against the wet stone, seeing now the full circumference of that carved band. You trace each rosette with your fingertip, feeling the grooves worn by centuries of current. You smile at the thought of ancient hands chiseling these shapes, small acts of devotion that survive long after empires fall. You wade between collapsed walls that skip beneath the lantern's glow like sunken pathways. The stones form a crooked corridor, and you follow it, water swirling around your thighs. At the corridor's end, a pair of pillars stand in still water, their capitals carved as lotus buds half-opened. You imagine standing here long ago, offerings held in outstretched hands, hearts silent in prayer. You lower your lantern into the water, its light ablaze beneath the surface, and watch fish scatter as if startled by your intrusion. You crouch and let your fingertips drift over the silt-smooth bases, then close your eyes and breathe deep of cold water and distant time. Behind you, a hush wraps the corridor, broken only by your own breath and the soft movement of water. You rise and slip the lantern back above the surface, light spilling onto fog-wrapped columns. You tighten your grip on the shepherd's staff, the carved notches familiar against your palm, reminding you of guidance and caution. You pause to let the mist swirl around you, feeling at once small and part of something vast, a world both present and submerged. You follow the corridor to an open basin, a shallow pool set among flat stones. The basin's lip is carved with symbols you recognize: crescent moons and entwined fish, an emblem you first saw on submerged tablets. You kneel beside it and dip your hand in, tasting the water's pure chill. It is the same water that filled the city's fountains, that carried prayers from courtyards to corridors. You let the water drip from your fingers back into the basin, and the basin ripples in response, as if nodding to your offering. Above the basin, the mist shifts, revealing the roofline of a ruined gateway faintly emerging from the haze. Its arch is cracked, keystone missing, yet the outline is unmistakable. A ceremonial entrance that once opened onto a plaza. You stand and step toward it, lantern in one hand, staff in the other. The water recedes to your knees as you approach, and the ground beneath your feet changes from pebbles to large flagstones. Each stone bears a crack or chip, a fragment of a story waiting to be told. You pause at the arch's threshold, lantern light spilling through the broken curve and illuminating dust-lined steps leading down into darkness. The shepherd's staff reminds you of silent warnings, places to honor, not to disturb. You press both palms against the pillars at the arch's flanks, feeling the texture of carved grooves under gloved fingers. You imagine banners hanging here, fluttering in wind that now resides only in your memory. Beyond the arch, the water deepens sharply. You lean in, eyes straining to see where stone meets dark. Murk swirls with your lantern's beam, and you feel a tug of curiosity. One more step, one more discovery. But you remember the shepherd's warnings. This threshold is a place of power, a boundary not to be crossed lightly. You draw back, stepping out of the water with reverence, leaving the dark beyond unexplored for another time. You return to the shoal of pillars, moving slowly so as not to churn up silt. Each pillar stands as a silent sentinel, its story half told by carved motifs of lotus and wave, fish and moon. You run your fingertips over each, mapping the order of their procession, and then you step among them, lantern held at waist level, staff tapping lightly on the stones. The pillars bow under the mist's weight, each one part of a corridor that once guided pilgrims and priests alike. As the sun begins to crest the horizon, the fog lifts and swirls, revealing more of the ruins. Roofless chambers, coffin-shaped blocks, and long walls broken apart like shattered dreams. You watch the mist drain from their faces, water dripping from sills as if tears shed by the city itself. You step from pillar to pillar, a careful dance on stones that have waited centuries for visitors. You feel a thrill deeper than modern discovery, a communion with ghosts of builders, worshippers, and wanderers who came before. Your water-soaked cloak clings to your skin, and the cold seeps through your trousers. You cloth wipe your hands on a spare rag, then sit on a low ledge to pull on dry socks and boots. The lantern rests on the stones beside you, its glow flickering against darkened carvings. You warm your hands by inflating them with your breath, and the fisherman returns your gaze from the boat, oars paused, waiting to row you back. You rise, giving the stones one last reverent glance, and step into the water to wade back to the skiff. Each footfall sends gentle waves across submerged bricks, and you feel connected to these ruins not as an intruder, but as a caretaker of memory. You reach the boat's side and haul yourself in, boots filling with boat water that you shake free with a practiced kick. The fisherman guides the skiff back toward the pier, lantern light marking your path among unseen hazards. You lean back against the bench, the shepherd's staff resting across your lap, and let your mind drift through the day's discoveries. The fluted shafts, the lotus-budded capitals, the sacred basin, the boundary arch. Each site tells its own tale of craftsmanship and ceremony, of devotion and quiet power. By the time you reach solid land, the sun has risen fully, burning through the last wisps of mist. The village docks bustle with morning activity. Nets hung to dry, children chasing ducklings, smoke rising. You wake to a sky the color of muted bronze, the horizon a thin seam of light that promises dawn. The air is cool and carries the tang of wet earth and pine resin, a reminder that the day begins in gentle ritual. You slip on your linen shirt and wool trousers, knot your scarf at the nape of your neck, and secure the shepherd's staff beside your satchel. Lantern in hand, you step outside into the soft glow of morning, each breath filling your lungs with crisp clarity. Behind you, the village still slumbers. Before you stretches the lake, vast and inscrutable, awaiting its final reveal. By the pier, the fisherman waits, oars in hand, boat bobbing silently against the wooden posts. You settle onto the bench, lantern tucked beneath your chin, and he pushes off with steady strokes. Water parts beneath the blades in gentle arcs, and you drift in a corridor of rose-tinted ripples. Dawn's glow widens, gilding mist that hovers low over the surface. You watch as silver reflections yield to gold, and beneath that shifting light, shapes begin to emerge. The fabled spires you have chased through dreams and dives. As you near the site, the water shallows and reveals a cluster of columns rising from the lakebed like pillars of light. Each spire bears the hallmarks of ancient craftsmanship. Straight-edged blocks, precise joints, and carved reliefs worn soft by currents. You lean forward, peering through the rippled water, and catch your breath at the sight of lotus petals encircling a fluted shaft. The petals, though eroded, still convey a sense of blooming, as if the stone itself continues to awaken each sunrise. The fisherman props the oars and nods toward the nearest spire. You slip off your boots and wade into water that rises to your knees, lantern held high against the golden haze. Each step brings you closer to the first column, its base thick with green moss that parts beneath your feet like a sea-scented carpet. You crouch and press your palm to the stone, feeling its cool firmness through leather glove. You imagine hands of builders long gone, chiseling each groove with patient devotion, unaware of the water that would one day claim their work. You rise and circle the spire, lantern light dancing across carved friezes. Wave patterns, fish scales, and concentric circles that mirror the morning sun. You trace your fingertip along a spiral band, worn nearly flat, yet still registering as a gentle ridge. A small school of minnows darts beneath the surface, their silver bodies flicking between light and shadow. You smile at their boldness, as though they too recognize the sanctity of these stones. Beyond that pillar, another spire stands, taller and straighter, its capital carved in overlapping lotus petals. You wade toward it, water sloshing around your thighs, and shine the lantern on a submerged basin at its base. The basin is roughly rectangular, its edges lined with shallow channels that once carried offerings to the spire. You kneel and scoop a handful of water into your palm, tasting the cold purity of mountain springs mingled with ancient stone. You let the water drip back, sending ripples that glow like molten metal in the dawn. Standing again, you drift between the spires, each one marking a point on a sunken ceremonial path. Your staff taps lightly on the stones, guiding you as you map their positions in your mind. You recall the scholar's chart and the diary sketches, and you see how these spires align with the city's long-lost forum and temple precinct. The lake's current carries your lantern's light in slender pulses, connecting each column like beacons in a golden sea. At the third spire, you find a tile shard nestled in silt, a fragment of painted pottery bearing a lotus motif in faint reds and ochres. You lift it gently and cradle it in your palm, lantern close enough to reveal its chipped edges. The shard feels impossibly light and fragile, yet it holds a vivid spark of color that defies centuries underwater. You tuck it into your satchel, a promise to the city that its art survives, even in fragments. A soft breeze stirs the mist, and you glance toward the fourth spire, half lost in dawn's glow. This one is slender and smooth, lacking the ornate capitals of its neighbors. You wade toward it with deliberate steps, lantern raised, and discover at its base the remnants of carved steps leading down into darkness. You crouch and shine your light along the worn treads. 5 descending risers, each polished by water and footsteps. You imagine pilgrims descending here, lanterns in hand, to reach an inner sanctum now replaced by silt and silence. You stand at the threshold, heart thundering with reverence and curiosity. The shepherd's staff pressed against your side reminds you of silent warnings, boundaries where ghosts stir and currents shift unexpectedly. You hesitate, lantern poised over the steps, and you whisper your oath, to remember, to honor, to tread lightly on these sacred stones. Then you step forward just far enough to peer into the dark well beneath, where water shifts with no visible source. Moments pass in hushed watchfulness, lantern beam probing the void. You see no stone arch or balustrade, only inky black holding echoes of departed lives. You kneel at the top step and place a gloved hand on the worn stone, closing your eyes to listen, to the distant drip of water, the soft shift of silt, your own steady heartbeat. You sense the weight of centuries pressing gently upon you, as though the city itself inclines in welcome or caution. You rise and retreat, careful not to dislodge silt, lantern guiding your path back to open water. The fisherman has nosed the boat close, lantern in hand, and he echoes your silent relief as you climb aboard. Boots dripping, you settle into the bench and let the boat drift while he unhooks the oars. Dawn's light blooms across the lake in an unbroken ribbon of gold, and you feel your spirit lift with it, buoyant, awed, and deeply grateful. You row slowly toward the shore, each stroke releasing droplets that catch the sunlight like living jewels. The spires fade behind you in the mist's retreat, yet their image lingers in your mind. Stone petals unfurling in sunrise, columns of devotion standing against time, steps descending into the heart of memory. You guide the boat onto pebbles, tie the bowline, and step onto solid ground, the mist parting to reveal familiar shingles and thatched roofs. Walking back through the village, you cradle the shepherd's staff and lantern, the warm weight of each in your hands. You pass cottages waking to morning chores, bakers kneading dough, wool spinners tending looms, children chasing ducks along the lane. Each household greets you with nods of recognition, as though you carry the city's secrets gently in your wake. At your lodging, you set out the shard and a rough map you sketched in the boat's bench, marking each spire's position. You clean the lantern glass and stow the sails of staff and satchel. The scholar arrives with a bowl of warm broth, steam curling like ghostly fingers in the bright morning. You share your tale of dawn's ephemeral spires, and he listens, eyes bright with wonder. You eat the broth in slow sips, its warmth seeping into your bones, anchoring you back in the present. The shard of pottery rests on the table, its lotus motif catching stray light. You trace it with a fingertip, marveling that this symbol of rebirth endures, even after tides have claimed roofs and streets. As you prepare for rest, you hang the shepherd's staff beside your bedroll, staff notched to guide your dreams. You stow the lantern on a low shelf, ready for tomorrow's first stirrings. You lay your head down, the shard and map within reach, and close your eyes to the murmur of memories that will cradle you to sleep. The world outside settles into a softer rhythm as you drift between waking and dreaming. Each breath carries you farther from the day's discoveries and closer to the gentle embrace of sleep. You feel the steady thrum of the lake's heartbeat in your bones, a lullaby of water and stone that guides you into restful depths. Memories of lotus-topped pillars, of steps descending into secret chambers, and of golden light dancing on ancient carvings begin to blur at the edges, melding into a tapestry of warmth and wonder. You sense the city's presence around you, not as a distant ruin, but as a friend who leans close to share confidences beneath the hush of dawn. Its stories drift in your mind like tendrils of mist, soft and elusive, always promising new discoveries beyond the horizon of sleep. The shepherd's staff rests within your reach, a silent sentinel anchoring you to the land and water you hold dear. In the quiet, you feel gratitude for every whisper of stone and ripple of water, for every echo you traced and every secret you honored. You release the day's excitement, letting it dissolve into the gentle cadence of your breath. You are held by this world of lanternlit ruins and meadow-guarded mysteries, held by a place both ancient and alive. With each exhale, you sink deeper into comfort, cocooned by blankets and dreams. The final image in your mind's eye is of a single column standing tall in dawn's glow, petals of stone unfurling to greet the sun. You carry that vision into slumber, knowing that in sleep,